Hello, everybody. It is time, finally, for the 2021 Hoeg Law YouTube channel debate program Game of the Year. We used to do this as capsules of each video game, but frankly, the law calls at the end of each year, so we moved it to a debate. If Tom could slow down and take off the sound of that YouTube channel he just opened, could you mute that, buddy? What in the world? Okay, I think that was me, actually. That's great. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Please let us know if the mics are working. We're doing this a little bit differently this year. If the stream is coming through, if everything is happening as we have wanted it to happen, please confirm that for us. And with that said, I'd like to introduce the one, the only, Tom Hoeg, who I know you've all been waiting to hear from more than you've been waiting to hear from me. Hey, Tom, how are you doing, buddy?
Good. I just got the YouTube chat up, so I can keep track of it because yeah, I'm speaking now. Can you guys hear me?
I can certainly hear you. I'm ready to talk. I just don't know whether everything is working because nobody has said that they can hear the microphone. Dell says he can't hear Tom.
Yeah. Dell said he couldn't hear me. Audio is good. Cool. Yeah, hi, everybody.
Dell's in now, so that's good. That's good. Well, Tom, first of all, everybody is thrilled to hear from you. Everybody is thrilled to see that you're alive. If you recall, last December, we told folks that in 2021, you'd be appearing more often because you like doing this. And I believe that was the last time you appeared.
Did we say that?
We did. We said more THABTOs. Everybody likes them. And instead of THABTOs, what I got was every 3 or 4 videos, people saying, where the heck is Tom? Where is Tom? Yes, Rick, I know what you had to say. Where's Tom? So, Tom, can you, one, I know you have a few disclaimers to give, but 2, in, brief form, say, hey, had a busy year, and I've told people that you've left Activision. Nobody knows where you've gone. I didn't know what could be said about that. So just hit us with your brief details for 2021 as you find yourself talking about video games once again.
Yeah, so 2021 was a whirlwind, which is why I haven't really had a lot of times to do THABTOs. I had some personal time I had to take off in the middle to late part of the year, so I didn't actually play a lot of games from like August to November, or at least you'll see some in
doing
there.
some catching up, folks. It's no worry.
But my list may be a little peculiar for that. Yep, I changed jobs, so this will be the disclaimer part. So first of all, I was an employee of High Moon Studios, which is owned by Activision. So any commentary, for both of these, any opinions I express are solely my own. They do not represent Activision or High Moon in any way.
Lawyers.
And then I actually moved to ZeniMax Online Studios just a couple weeks ago, really. And they are owned by Microsoft. So the opinions I express are solely my own. I do not represent Microsoft or ZeniMax Online Studios in any way. Also, what I'm working on at ZeniMax is super private, confidential, and I can't talk about it at all.
I know nothing, for the record.
I won't.
So let me get this straight, Tom. You said Activision, too big of a shop. I'm going to go to Microsoft. Is that how it went down?
Not exactly. I think I'd done enough Call of Duty for my career.
Sure. Very popular game. But yeah, so you're moving on. Tom is hopefully in greener pastures, excited about everything. And yeah, he is at ZeniMax Online, which I think is most prominently known for, Tom can correct me on this, as Elder Scrolls Online right now. Is that accurate?
I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We don't want him to get even remotely close to any kind of borderlines of what he might say. But so he's had one of those years, folks, where you change up a whole bunch of stuff and you go through some things. But he's happy to be here now, I think. I'm speaking for him at this point, but I'd like to think he's happy to be here and that I didn't browbeat him. And I definitely didn't tweet out the announcement for this the second he agreed to it to make sure he couldn't back up. So that wasn't me. I didn't do that. Right, Tom?
As soon as I was like, yeah, I think I could do that.
Yep.
Here's the tweet.
Yep, you're in. Anyway, okay. So you said you didn't play a ton of games. The good news is AAA gaming kind of slowish this year, right? Pandemic moved a bunch of stuff we know to early 2022. Even said, I thought 2021 was kind of cool. You got to dive into a bunch of different things, a lot of weird little things, and even the AAA space was doing what they could. They were, I think we talked about this earlier, they were rebooting, they're remastering, they're getting frame rates up across the generations because that's the easiest thing for them to do. And so I found myself with a lot to play, a lot of stuff that I enjoyed, even if I mean, I think realistically, Sony basically goes dark the second half of the year. Like they just go away, and don't really release much of anything. Did you find that you had a good year gaming when you did get a chance to game, or is this a down year to you?
No, I mean, I think it was decent. Like when I was going through and putting together my list, one, I noticed that I played most of the major releases and a bunch of sort of smaller ones. And also, yeah, it was a weird kind of like a lot of next gen updates and upgrades, and some of them like really breathed a lot of new life into the games. Like I hadn't played Final Fantasy VII that much, and I got into that with the intergrade upgrade.
Sure, I
I
thought the
mean, there's
1997 version was great.
yeah, no, so they really brought it up to speed for me. There's just basically, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like list it
No,
all,
I
but there were
jokingly said, I think I tweeted out, I jokingly said there could just be a division of, "Oh, I'm going to play Death Stranding Director's Cut and Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. Maybe I'll play some Alan Wake remastered. Hit me with some of that Final Fantasy VII Intergrade." You could have an entire category of like stuff I already liked that runs a bit better and looks a little prettier.
right, right.
So no, I think that's great. I want to talk to people a little bit about what we're going to do format wise. It's going to be similar, but not identical to what we did last year. We're going to have a discussion of honorable mentions, things that aren't on our list. I also have a list that I made that's effectively things that won't appear on my top 10 so that, either that's because I didn't play them enough or so that we can have a good, honest meeting of the minds where you yell at me in chat about the fact that I don't much love Halo Infinite. So we'll get there. So get your barbs and jibes ready. We'll have that as a page ready to go. The other thing we did this year that's a little bit different is that Tom has assembled kind of similar lists and certainly his top 10, but we don't have that prepared in the same way that I have mine prepared. I'll have slides and, great stuff because I'm in charge. And of course, my list is better. But Tom wants to keep his a mystery. I think that's going to work pretty well. But effectively, what we'll be doing is we'll be going through Tom's list and we'll be creating it on the fly. So when Tom gives us something real weird and inscrutable, we're going to be adding it to his list. And then we'll be talking about what random game he added so that we can understand what he's thinking. But before then, we're going to be talking about everything else that we've talked about in prior broadcasts. And we'll be starting with my honorable mentions, unless Tom had anything else to add here.
No, we can do that. That's cool.
All right. Is everybody ready? Let's talk about some great games that didn't make my list. And then we'll go from there with the rest and have a great time. And then Tom will tell me how many things I got wrong because that's what he does. So let's talk about my honorable mentions. So number one on this list, and these are things you won't see on my top 10, but I thought I enjoyed, I had fun with. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I know that was one of the Game Awards top 5 games of the year. I enjoyed it. I fully expect this game to be on Tom's list. He doesn't have to say anything right now. I'm putting it here primarily for graphics. It's a graphical powerhouse. It has ray tracing at 60 frames per second on PlayStation with a lower resolution, but still very, very impressive. And to be honest with you, it looks like a Pixar movie. Is that? And Tom, I really do have a feeling it's going to be on your list eventually. So I don't know how much you want to add here, but
we can dive into it later. It might come up.
We could dive into it later. It will be making another appearance on the broadcast, everyone. I also liked, for the same reason, really, the independent game. It's like Kenya. She pronounces it very specifically in the game, and I never remember what it is. But it's the game with the girl that looks like also from a Pixar movie and the little spirit sprites that my daughters love a lot. And you go around and collecting them. And again, I thought it was a graphical showcase as an indie game. But unlike some other folks, I find it to be like a little pedestrian. It's just very simplistic. Simplistic in battle, simplistic in exploration, simplistic in storyline. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you feel like that. But that, in case you're wondering, why it's not quite on my top 10. Tom, anything to add there? Have you played this one?
No, my wife did.
Okay.
she really got into PlayStation gaming like the back half of this year. But no, I haven't. I've seen like a little bit
Oh yeah,
of it.
we can mention one thing I know your wife is into that I don't think will be on our list. Who knows? But the Tom Hoeg clan has become huge Fortniters.
Yeah, I actually have it on my honorable mention that we can talk about. Obviously,
Okay.
Fortnite isn't even close to new.
Yeah.
But yeah, my family got really into it this year. And I think the game sort of feels better than it has. Also, I'm still a terrible builder, and I probably always will be, and that's fine.
Yeah, you don't need to be able to build. You just need to be able to get the builders into a rough spot and then shotgun them. You know how it is.
That is true. I always carry around a bunch of fireflies and rocket launchers and stuff so that when they start building, I can start breaking.
Now, Casey Harrington, this was an awful year for gaming. I'm going to say I had about 70 games that were in various states of going on my list. So it's an awful year, perhaps, for AAA gaming. I think there was a lot of cool stuff this year. And by the way, in chat, you want to raise something? If you want to flag us with @Hoeg Law, that's the easiest way to see it. We're otherwise going to be conversing, obviously. So if we miss it, I apologize. Also, super chats, always welcome. Definitely not necessary. But those flag us in specific kind of colored tabs as well. But yeah, Fortnite, it's on Tom's honorable mention list. I've played it a bunch. I think people find that funny because I've had interactions with Tim Sweeney. I've covered Epic versus Apple for so long now. And I think if you've been in virtual legality for a while, you can separate, hey, they're doing a lawsuit that I don't think is terribly wise from, hey, I think their product is okay. And so I do play Fortnite regularly with Tom and his family, and certainly with my girls. It continues to be one of the best examples of a living game that adjusts and adjusts and adjusts and gives you something to pop in for every time. Even if you don't love multicolored characters and, R&B and jazz dancing and whatever else they're doing, it's still a lot of fun, and it's very what do I call it, Tom? It's comfortable. You can have a conversation while you play it. It's chill.
Yeah, it's like a phone call that has a game attached.
Right. And I think that can be fun. So the next entry, and this is one that might be on Tom's list. We haven't talked about any of these beforehand. Is Hitman 3 for me? Really a game I thoroughly enjoy. It offers the kind of murder puzzle that I think is handled better in its framework than it is in Deathloop. Spoiler alert for what's not on my list. But it doesn't quite rise to the level for me of being something that I enjoyed in the top 10's place. And that's really the only reason it isn't there. I totally understand if people want to put it first, if it's high on their list. Hitman has just never been a series that gets up there in my stratosphere. You have any thoughts on that, Tom?
I'm really interested to see what your list contains. Just that's all I can say. Are we doing my honorable mentions and notable omissions?
Yeah, I think we'll do
should I be talking about it now?
I think we'll do them at the same time. You can throw on anything because we don't have slides for you. Okay. So mention anything that kind of pops into your head that relates to this, and then we'll go back to the cameras and we'll talk to you and just what your lists are for these.
So for what it's worth, Hitman 3 also appeared on my honorable mentions. Mostly because I think it's great. I got really into it. I haven't played the content of the third one at all yet because having next gen sort of remasters of all the previous content that I haven't super played, I got really into it. I finished the first one, was moving through the second one. But they're just, they're great. Hitman, the stuff I'm playing isn't even new. So I don't know if that should count. And I can't, evaluate Hitman 3 itself.
Yeah, one of the coolest things the Hitman series does is it kind of builds back everything that was in the prior games and puts them into whatever the latest one was. So that's very cool. Hitman 3 has some really interesting puzzles, and if you really get into it and you just decide that you want to own a specific location, you can spend 10 hours going through all the various iterations they have of moving people around and how to do what you want to do. And I think that's really impressive. It's just the way that I play games. I'm not usually saying I want to learn this level for 10 hours, even though they've built that in. So I respect it more than I enjoy it, I think, at the end of the day. So I really like Hitman 3, but I buzzed right through it, and then I kind of went back for a couple hours per level, and that's it. It's kind of done for me. So the next game on my list is Far Cry 6. Everybody's going to yell at me. Oh, we have a super chat. Top 3 lawsuits of the year. That's easy. That's Epic versus Apple. That is California versus Activision. Sorry, Tom. And that is probably it's going to be like the the OSHA mandate lawsuits that are currently buzzing through. Sixth Circuit just said that they're okay. Supreme Court's going to get them next. Something along those lines outside of the virtual legality sphere. We're not really bringing that to the party usually on the channel, but thank you for the super chat. Absolutely. My next is Far Cry 6. A bunch of people are going to have a problem with this, both because Ubisoft also mired in scandal and because Ubi game as a thing isn't loved by as many people as me. I don't know. Do you have any Ubi games on your list, Tom?
I do.
Okay. Is it on your list for the year?
Yep.
Sweet. All right, we'll get back to it. So for me, Far Cry 6 is a very cool world, and I like going and doing the filler quests and interacting with it in a Ubi game. And I'm calling it that because I fully acknowledge that a Ubisoft game across basically all of its franchises has a virtual similarity of feel that I can fully acknowledge while still saying I like them. I find them enjoyable. And I think actually Far Cry 6's Cuba stand-in is one of the better realized ones that I've seen. So that's why it's there. You can see it for open world. It Takes Two, the Game Awards Game of the Year, is on here for co-op. Obviously, it's tremendous co-op experience. Tom and I got to play it together on the couch. What do you think It Takes Two, if you can say anything about it right now, Tom?
You may also be seeing it later.
Okay. All right. Well, Tom might not be able to say much on it, but you can, I mean,
that's why I'm very excited to see what your list contains.
Okay, so half of my honorable mention list is apparently on Tom's list. We'll see how that goes. But It Takes Two, obviously very inventive, very innovative, a lot of fun. Again, when I'm making my list, it really is, what were the top 10 things that I enjoyed? What were the top 10 experiences I had for the year? Loved It Takes Two. Loved it. Fully recommend it. I'm not regularly in a position to co-op play. I'm not regularly in a position to do that. And so it's never going to be kind of super high on my list. It was a very specialized experience for me. If you're regularly co-oping, if that's something that you enjoy, I think it's going to work better for you. But that's why it's on the honorable mention list, not on the top 10. New Pokemon Snap, probably one of the most played games in the Hoeg household. My wife absolutely adores it. She does have a photography business. That might play into it. Don't know. But it is a very significant upgrade and increase for what was one of the best Nintendo 64 camera-based Pokemon spotting games. And so I think New Pokemon Snap deserves more credit than it got in this award season. I wanted to make sure it was on the honorable mention list because I just had a fantastic time with it. Did you play this one, Tom?
I'm
Not
aware of it. I tried to kind of sell my kids on it, and they're like, that sounds boring. So no, it wasn't really played.
You got the old that sounds boring. Well, one game on my top 10 list gets the my girls don't allow me to play it in front of them. They think it's so boring. So that'll be fun to talk about. Next item on my list, Psychonauts 2. You can see what I labeled it. Number 11. If you ever have made a top 10 list yourself, you've ever looked at these things in the video game landscape, otherwise had these conversations, sometimes you get to the bottom and you got these really difficult decisions. And I think Psychonauts 2 could easily be someone's game of the year. It's a tremendous adventure game. It's tremendously novel. It's tremendously imaginative. I think it represents what Microsoft can do with resources and money at these companies that they're buying, like Double Fine. It just wasn't one of my favorite 10 experiences. Dom, you want to add anything on Psychonauts 2?
Yeah, so Psychonauts 2 appears on my notable omissions in terms of I've heard great things. Pretty sure it would be on my list. I didn't play it. And my number 11 was Outriders. Was reorganizing my list a lot. I played a ton of Outriders when it came out. I went back to check out the new Horizon update that they just released and just didn't grab me. I'm pretty sure that I'm done with it. I think the powers and character builds really interesting. I think there's a lot of cool, crazy builds that you can make, but the encounter setup isn't really great. The narrative's kind of and the original end game I just really didn't like. I don't like anything that's like a speed run mechanic.
Right. And it's important to note they removed the timers. That was their latest update.
So I fell off pretty hard, and I don't think I'm likely to go back to it. That being said, I spent a lot of time with it. I see a lot of it's Outriders is one of the most perfect examples of a game that does some stuff really great and some stuff really poor. And so kind of in the middle, hard to say how I feel about it overall.
Yeah, I mean, Outriders, one of the things, if you haven't played it, viewers, is that it really does borrow the Diablo mantra, especially the modern Diablo, of actually having interesting weapons and weird things that they do, and combinations of a kind of specifically small skill set that you earn in a fashion I think is really good. Outriders bounced off me a little bit because if you know anything about me, you know, I don't love bleakness and nihilism.
Super bleak.
And I will say that Outriders is just dark and has very specific thoughts about the nature of humanity when left to its own devices. That I might well be right philosophically. I don't really want to argue that point. It's just not a. You feel like you need a shower sometimes after that. So I don't love it as much as I maybe should for the gameplay elements because I think it's well designed. But that's a good ad, Tom, in terms of Outriders. We do have a super chat. Thank you very much, Renault. It Takes Two was overrated as a family game. References to death, profanity, a teen rating, and a torture scene. How do they beat Nintendo nominees? That's a great question. It's interesting to me when we talk about ratings, and this is movies and video games both, that the psychological, the implications of what is said or what is shown doesn't quite usually rise to the level of triggering some of the things that might otherwise prevent you from getting a lower rating either in a movie or a video game, or here making you ineligible for specific nomination categories. So yeah, I mean, It Takes Two is interesting in and of itself, which is it's talking about kind of a marriage on the rocks and divorce and a magic book that has the parents maybe get back together in a way that, depending on how far you get in the game, is like could be marginally unhealthy. I mean, there's interesting things that happen there from a thematic standpoint. I'm really just evaluating it on it's a super cool game with super cool ideas rather than those elements, but I think they're well taken. And then the last entry on my honorable mention list is a game that I don't know if everybody's heard of. It's a PC game called Slipways, which I understand was actually originally, I want to say it's like an itch.io game or something like that. And it's a 4X game kind of stripped down to just its raw element. So I have it labeled here as resource management, but it's picking where to set specific logistical pathways between planets in a solar system, galaxy kind of situation, and being able to manage that as the supply chain logistics, which, you know, are a good topic in 2021, get more and more complicated. So I love it. Very simplistic in terms of graphical presentation, but it's also very straight to the point because of that. So I wanted to make sure it got mentioned here. And that's my honorable mentions list. Tom, anything seems silly on there?
Well, like I said, you'll be seeing some of
Yeah.
these again.
Okay. And now
then
let's talk about yours.
now I'm gonna hit some honorable mentions that I think are probably on Rick's notable omissions. So that'll
Okay.
be fun.
Hey.
So the first thing I put honorable mention for, so this didn't make the list, was Deathloop. I didn't play enough of it to really judge, which may be kind of a damning
Oh, I did.
review in and of itself. But like a bunch of people that I really trust their opinions, like adored it, best game they've played in years. So I want to come back to it and give it another shot.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Also, Eric Granada says he really loved Spiritfarer. That was last year. But obviously, it's new to you when you play it. One of the games that I adored this year was called Lost Words, that didn't make any of these lists because I was informed that it came out last year. So I totally understand. Lost Words, fantastic. Spiritfarer, very good. And talk about commentary on the human experience. Continue, Tom.
So this one I had a funny note on, which is Resident Evil Village. I put this here and said I was kind of enjoying this, and then Rick said he hated it, and I stopped playing. I don't know if that's related.
That's too much power. First of all,
this is the little brother dynamic.
I didn't.
Unfortunately,
did I say I hated it? Did I?
Or it might have even been worse. You're like, it's not worth getting through, or something.
I don't think
like
it's worth
that.
getting through. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's worse or not. I think that's, yeah. So again, Resident Evil Village, one of the nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. This is one of those that I just find inexplicable. And to give my tilt on this, I love Resident Evil. I can basically find something to love about all Resident Evils, including Resident Evil Village. But Resident Evil Village is much closer to the Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6 kind of zeitgeist understanding of the spectrum of Resident Evil experiences for me than it is the top tier 2s and 4s or wherever you want to put that. Yeah, I feel bad now. If the story is
maybe I'll just
kind of enjoying it and then I talk to you, that's not the dream.
Maybe after enough of this, enough people telling me you're wrong, I'll get the strength to go back and play it.
Batisog, I appreciate you not knowing who's older. That's me. I'm older by about 3 years. But yeah, okay. Continue with your list.
Let's see. Other things I had. I put the Neo collection on here. The reason it's not eligible is it's pure remaster frame rate. But it's 2 great games together for a decent price. I haven't played number 2 very much. I got really into 1. I think I got better at like Souls likes or like the more technical combat recently, so I was able to appreciate it much more. And was just really enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, you love those Souls games. I mean, I think that's important kind of background too. You like the concept of learning an environment and going slowly in every inch a mile, and you play more of those than I do.
Yep. And when I first played Neo, I mostly was doing like chintzy sort of cheese to try to beat guys because I wasn't very good at the combat.
Sure.
And this time around, I got much better at like handling when to do my like recharges and blocks and different stuff. And so it's much more fun when you can manage this.
You're way better than me. I watch you on like the PlayStation broadcast. That's how I play these games. All right, I'll give this one to you. We have a super chat from Gecko Gamer. Best bad game, Tom.
So I need definition. That's not like worst game. That's like
let's go. It's kind of objectively bad on a review basis, as far as you can tell. You still enjoy it. Guilty pleasure.
Oh man, you threw this to me, and I don't actually have a good.
Well, since I've been thinking about it, just because we were having this conversation, I can tell you I really enjoy Resident Evil 6. I know people hate that one.
This is best bad game of all time.
Yeah, not of the year. What have you liked that other people don't like?
It's still.
What's that game with the talking spaceship that I love so much, Tom? I don't. Jaeger.
Oh,
Jaeger is terrible. I love Jaeger. Go check that one out. What is it? An Xbox game?
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to boot that one up.
I love Jaeger. Yeah, no, I got tons of these. Are you kidding me? I don't. People call me a contrarian now because there's so much stuff that I like that other people don't like. You don't have a choice for this, Tom? Come on.
I unfortunately don't have a good response for this.
All right, you think about that. I want to hear it somewhere in this whole broadcast. All right, you think on that question.
It takes me a very long time to like put together these lists. Like I have to do like review because I don't remember anything. Like
you want a fun game? Put my brother in front of a character creator and ask him to name the character in front of him.
I've gotten better.
Have you? This used to be a 45-minute process.
Yep.
You're getting the behind the scenes here.
You have to live with that name for the whole game.
Yep.
Like you got to be really sure that's what you want.
Yep. We got a comment from Blue that says plenty of good indie games this year. There'll be indie representation on my list. I promise. So that's definitely the case. You have anything more on your honorable mention list, bud?
Mass Effect Legendary Edition, again, a remaster.
Oh, sure. Big remaster.
Just great to see. I wish I had time to kind of dive into it again. I might
that's
try
good.
anyway.
That's
fair. But I'm glad that it finally came out. We have the Gloomhaven port, like effectively.
I haven't gotten to play that yet. Yeah.
It's a port of a game. Pretty much everyone's heard of Gloomhaven, but it's also probably the best transliteration of a board game to a video game ever. Like they put a lot of care into it. It's
just to like pretend that all you have not just played board games of this kind of level. Gloomhaven is a dungeon crawler with a living legacy kind of element. So you're going through a plot line, even in board game form, and they turn this into a pretty darn good video game. I know you assume that they know what Gloomhaven is. I know it's the top game of like the last 5 years. I get that. But you'll see what is Gloomhaven is one of our chat questions. It's a very popular, very famous tabletop board game that I highly recommend if you can play it on board game. It's very complicated, so you kind of have to be in that space of playing complicated board games. But I haven't played it yet. I do have it purchased. I'm waiting for a Steam Deck. But it is the type of game that would be good to translate into computers doing some math for you.
Yeah, it lets the computer do some of the heavy lifting. It has multiplayer so that like Rick and I could actually play it together. We've done some Gloomhaven sessions, when I've been visiting, but it's not something that we can do all the time. It's a little bit heavy for tabletop simulator. So the dedicated app it's really great. It also reminds me that I'm not particularly good at Gloomhaven. So
it's a bit like taking a calculus test on the fly.
I may need to tone it down.
See, now I got people asking me about Wingspan.
Rick, you may not know this. Rick doesn't like Wingspan in its paper form.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could talk. We're going to go. This will be an adjunct board game video at some point. I don't love Wingspan. I find it to be a kind of weird economic game that is mostly loved by people because it has a bird feeder rolling thing. But we can differ on that. A lot of people really love Wingspan. So yeah, if you're into board games, you can check that one out. Wingspan, very popular. Gloomhaven, very popular. Anything else, Tom?
Skyrim Anniversary Collection. This is not just me being a shill. Honestly,
yeah, that's shilling now. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I joke because it's like, I originally wrote it as like Skyrim 2021. But every time they do a release, even when it's not huge, like I jump back into it. I'm like, this is fun. I like this. I've played the first quest with the Golden Claw or whatever. I don't know, a dozen times. So
beloved.
I just keep popping in there. So I just gave it honorable mention. Maybe it doesn't even deserve that. I'm not sure, but I played it and enjoyed it this year. So,
you know what? These are our lists, man. You don't have to defend them to like the zeitgeist or whatever. So
I don't know. People are in the chat like Skyrim. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's fine. The chat is gonna do what the chat's gonna do, Tom.
No, it's true. I'm just hoping that it doesn't make me say anything I shouldn't.
Okay, there you go.
And then yeah, the last thing on here we already talked about, which was Fortnite. It's not new. I do think that they've improved it over time. This was the start of a new chapter this year. My family got super into it. It's been a fun thing for us to do together. Me and my wife have played a lot together, which we don't normally do. So, yeah, deserves the mention just because I've spent a lot of time on it this year.
Excellent. And is that your honorable mentions?
That is my honorable mentions.
Fantastic. See, things are going great. We're moving right along.
No, it's true. I think honorable mentions alone took like an hour last year. So,
you know. Well, you know, there's games to talk about, and some of those games are going to be things that are going to make people a little upset. So, I'm a bit late. Was Tom allowed to say where he's working? You want to announce it again, Tom?
Oh, ZeniMax Online Studios.
Yeah, on a super secret project that he won't even tell his brother about. So take that, ZeniMax lawyers. So this is the you won't see on my list. And some of these are because I don't think they're worthy. And some of these are because I haven't played them enough that I know people are going to ask me about. Specifically those last two. People know I'm a lawyer. And so people assume I play all the lawyer games. And I get to them eventually. But I've played Lost Judgment enough to know that it's going to be great. And probably would be on my top 10 list, but I haven't played enough to put it there. And Great Ace Attorney, I haven't played at all, haven't bought it, because my daughters actually love going through the Ace Attorney games. And we're about halfway through the third game. And it was kind of our deal that I was going to buy Great Ace Attorney when I did. Now, the other games on this list are things that I just didn't think got to that level. The first of which is Deathloop, GameSpot's Game of the Year, which I think might be the most overrated game from the critical class that I can recall in a long, long time. I like Deathloop. I think Deathloop solved a number of design problems that it would have had with figuring out how this thing was going to work. I think in terms of the resources spent on that, they were well worth it. I think the game is well designed from that perspective. I think that playing the game, experiencing the game, and the actual environments that you go through in the game are substandard. I think the AI is bad. I think the actual murder puzzle element isn't great. And I think the environments, I think I described it as someone taking what has to be a series of shortcuts like in a Deus Ex game and sprinkling a BioShock 1960s flavor over the environment. I don't think it's very functional. That comes across as mean. I did enjoy my time with Deathloop. It's like a 7 for me out of 10. But that's how I feel about it. I feel like it's Assassin's Creed and that we can expect great things from Assassin's Creed 2 / Deathloop 2. And that's coming from someone that loves Arcane. Arcane's made some of my favorite games. I love Dishonored. I love specifically Prey. And out of that, I specifically love their DLC Moon Crash, which I highly recommend to everyone on Earth. And that Moon Crash DLC was clearly the progenitor of what they did on Deathloop, only in my opinion, worse. So it won't be on my list. If you loved it, I'm not here to have this conversation to take away your joy. I am sincerely glad, but it doesn't rise to that level for me. Halo Infinite does not rise to the level of Deathloop for me. So Halo Infinite has some really cool concepts. It's a very clean looking game. It's enjoyable in small bits to actually have a firefight with certain sets of enemies in certain specific ways. As a campaign itself, and I'm not really evaluating the multiplayer here. I'm not a multiplayer guy. It seemed cool to me. So if you love that for that reason, that's totally fine as well. But in terms of the campaign, it predominantly feels unfinished to me. Or more specifically, like a company that was trying to figure out how to do an open world Halo for a long, long time and then didn't have enough time to actually populate it with a real campaign. That the campaign gets started just as it's ending in terms of plot line, that there's a lot of Ubisofting around there. If you don't like Ubi game, I'm a little unclear how you can really be thoroughly enjoying the Halo Infinite experience. But if you do, more power to you. I keep bouncing off it. I keep playing it for a couple hours and saying I'd rather be doing something else. And that's a problem. I was buzzing through the plot line because I wasn't enjoying kind of the looking for other stuff. And it's a pretty short campaign. It doesn't really go very far in places. And it skips the stuff I like about Halo, the mystery, the wonder, the awe, the stuff that was from the original trilogy that brought me to the franchise in the first place. So I'm very sorry if you love it. Know that I'm just an idiot on the internet saying things. If you continue to love it, I am thrilled for you. But that's why you see Deathloop and Halo Infinite there at the top of my list. 7 out of 10s. I don't dislike 7 out of 10s. I like having 7 out of 10s in my library. They don't get on my top 10 list. So those are those two. So, does that make sense in terms of analysis, Tom?
Yeah, I have Halo Infinite on my notable omissions as well. Rick knows that I sort of sent him an unsolicited text when I
Unsolicited.
first started playing the campaign. That was like, hot take. I don't think this is very good. The campaign, I don't know. It's like I loved Halo I think in its heyday, and I think it's like slowly kind of left that.
Sure.
I think I played some of the multiplayer and that felt, solid and good. And Halo multiplayer feels great. The campaign feels kind of small. I'm not super interested. The game, it's doing, like you said, like Ubi game, but not well. So every time I was playing it, I'm like, all right, maybe I should just go play Far Cry 6.
If you
And
got both of them sitting next to each other, you definitely have that thought in your head.
I have tried a couple times to get into it. Some of it feels decent, but I don't know. When I play Halo Infinite, I'm either like, I think I should go play Far Cry, or I'm like, I think I should go play Destiny. But I'm never like, I want to stay here and play this.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing of it, right? You got a digital library. You're playing these systems. You're always kind of looking at multiple boxes about what you should actually put on your screen. So it's not that Halo is bad. I think Halo is a good game. I think Deathloop is a good game, but you're always constantly evaluating it between should I turn this on or should I turn that on? And I see somebody ask me the question, how much of a Halo fan would you say you are in general? I think it's really two separate franchises. I was in midnight lines for Halo 2 and Halo 3. Felt those were worthy of that. I've been a fan of the Bungie game for a long time, including the way they told stories through Marathon and Myth and then Halo. That went away with 343. They're a different set of people. This isn't me kind of judging them for that, but it's not what Bungie could do at their prime. So I just haven't liked 4, 5, and now Infinite as much. I think Infinite's a better direction for them to go. Honestly, I do, than 4 and 5, because 4 and 5 felt like they were discount store Bungie Halos, and this feels like something new. I think that much like Deathloop, Halo Infinite can be something more. And I think they intend to essentially put expansion packs in the thing and give you actual stories. So I think that's great. I wish I liked it more day one, because I really do like the cleanness of the visuals. It's not stressing the system too hard, but there's a certain clarity of color that I like. I wish it had biomes. It really doesn't. I wish it felt a little bit less procedurally generated because it does. Vehicles don't work very well in a lot of the stuff that they built. It's not designed to actually be played, I don't think, in certain form and fashion. So I don't like those aspects. And then, yes, I mean, with that being said, are there any games on this list that are just not good games to you? I'm so glad you asked. I think that we can definitely share a screen on that topic pretty quickly here. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Did that work? Oh, it did work. Wonderful. We're working on new buttons here at the Hoeg Law YouTube channel. Let's see how I felt about 12 minutes. 12 minutes, now completed, is bar none one of the worst games I've ever played. Its execrable design is exceeded only by the story it chooses to tell and the way it chooses to tell it. I regret every minute I engaged with or look forward to it. 0 out of 10. Understand that 0 out of 10 is coming from a person that did not actually spend extra money on this game. To give you the context for how we arrived at 12 minutes appearing in the third slot of my you won't see list. And I only really bring it up, I don't want to slam anybody that made anything, is because 12 minutes was nominated for Best Indie Game of the Year at the Game Awards. I can't fathom it. I literally can't fathom it. It's bad game design. It controls poorly. It is linear to a fault. You repeat yourself 1,000 times in every aspect of what you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, the story it tells is god-awful and would have been rejected from the CW on down at any major media network trying to tell a story of any kind. It would have been rejected as pamphlet material for the free printing you could have gotten at the printing press on the corner. That's how bad 12 minutes is. Tom, did I mess up on any of that?
I'm not as mean as you, but it is also on my notable omissions, and I didn't play it. I watched you play it, and it was terrible. It was real terrible.
It was bad. It's a bad game, and it was on Game Pass. And so you asked me what is bad on this. That's the one thing that's bad on this. Deathloop and Halo Infinite I pulled out to show that it just isn't on my top 10 list. But 12 minutes is god-awful. And even if it's already on your Game Pass, it's not worth your time. The rest of these, Death's Door is kind of similar to Deathloop and Halo Infinite. I just didn't gel with it as much as some people did. I saw it on a bunch of lists, wanted to make sure that was referenced. And Inscription, 1,000 people recommended to me. And I cannot tell you why I didn't get the chance to play it. But I didn't get a chance to play it. That's why it's here. Same as Loop Hero, Great Ace Attorney, and Lost Judgment. That's my list of things you won't see. You got any, Tom?
I talked about Psychonauts 2 earlier. I put Metroid Dread on here because lots of people said it's great, and I didn't get a chance to play it. I put, actually, I don't know if this is eligible, but I put Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker on my notable omissions. Again, I haven't played it.
Because you're in a queue for it right now. You're 10,000 people deep.
I have to respect something so popular that Square actually had to stop selling it to try to right the ship.
Yeah, that's fair. No, Endwalker, that's a good note. Final Fantasy XIV, obviously ridiculously popular. But no, I haven't played it. You can't play it unless you really devote your time to it.
Yeah, I heard the queues are like 3 hours right now, and there's a bug that occasionally kicks you out of the queue. So I also have Biomutant on here. I don't know if this is notable. Biomutant. I know a lot of people were hyped for it around me. And I basically hated it roughly 30 minutes into it.
He does hate it. He mentions it from time to time.
It's very clunky. I don't like the way it tells its story. It's like style is probably the coolest thing it's got going for it, but it's not a good game, and I don't like it.
I like Biomutant okay.
And the last one I have on my notable omissions is Valheim.
Very popular, yeah.
This was very popular, but I never really got into it, and I love survival craft games. I'm like a big survival craft gamer. I think the big draw here is that, from what I could tell, it was a lot better multiplayer. It was a lot better with friends. There's just like a lot of really cool, like, working together and crazy stuff happening. And that's not like my style. That I don't get to play that way most often.
I mean, that's the thing. It's similar to It Takes Two, right? Like, that could be awesome. It's just not the way our lives are organized right now. And that's the one thing I would say about these lists, too. We talked about Tom having a long year, maybe not playing everything that every one of you have played. And these lists are going to be very emblematic of what we specifically like and what we actually got a chance to play, right? That list of things that is on the you won't see list that aren't things that I already dislike or that I just don't think are at that level are things that I think could have been, right? Inscription, Loop Hero, Great Ace Attorney, Lost Judgment are things I think could have been on that list for me. They just haven't been played by me enough because we have a limited amount of time. I could show you my list, but I was up in the 60s or 70s of things that I had played enough to judge. And that's pretty good. It's a pretty goodly amount of games in a given year. So that's the nature of the beast here. Tom, anything else before we actually go to our top 10 list?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to go.
All
As we were
right.
talking about this, I was thinking like potentially more honorable mentions, and this is every year, and we've talked about it a little bit, which is like stuff I played either for the first time or like in its most first time seriously. This year, definitely, I think there were some of those, especially with next gen updates and things like that. So there's probably some stuff I haven't mentioned that I'm not thinking of that I actually spent a decent amount of time on this year. But here we
Yeah,
are.
I know you were playing Final Fantasy VII. Did you stick with that?
Nope.
These are
I can't
setups.
explain
These are
why
questions that are not to be answered in one word, man.
I keep bouncing off of it, and it's not like I recognize that it's good. Like I play it, I'm like, this is good, and then I play something else. I don't know why. I don't. It's. I think partially what I've got now is whenever when you've like restarted a game like 3 or 4 times, and so now you're very, very, very uh familiar with like the first 5 hours.
Sure. And it's
I
hard to
keep
get past that hump.
I keep hitting that, and I'm like,
Well, you're a pretty chronic restarter too. Like I'll
I
tell you
am.
to just pick up The Witcher 3 and just go. And you struggle with that kind of thing.
I got through the Witcher 3's like first little bit, and I feel good about it.
You're done? You're done witchering?
I'm sure there's more interesting stories and stuff, but that was still very solid, and I liked it.
Tom has completed The
And
Witcher 3.
And I mean, it tells a nice whole story.
So you're not going back. You'll go back to it when they give you the next gen update, right? No?
Yeah, I think that's probably my plan.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Well, it's time to get into it. I think the way that this is going to work is I do have my list kind of in slides and the way we can look at it kind of together. And then if you see something that I put on and it's on one of your numbers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change your list, which I haven't seen in advance, on the fly. And then we're going to be able to fill out yours as it goes. So that's what I think is our plan here. So we'll be starting with mine. If you see something that pops up on your list, we'll put it in, and then we'll go back to that number for where I just did to talk about your list after mine in the second slot. Does that make sense, Tom?
nope, I really 100% didn't follow what you just said, but
Cool.
I understand that when you say a thing, if I have that thing, I'm telling you.
All right, and then I'll prompt you for your number in your
Okay.
list. Okay, bud. All right, well then let's get to it. Number 10 game of the year here, a late arrival onto the list, making itself known to me, is the game Chorus. If you aren't familiar with this came out, I don't even know, a week ago, 10 days ago. And bear with me, folks, we're about to get fancy. So check this out. Oh, that's right. That's a
Ooh.
picture of the Corvus box. And if you don't know this game, it's about space. It's about space combat. If you're familiar with some older games that were popular in video games, it reminds me a little bit of Colony Wars or a game where you're interacting with multiple factions and getting into dogfights and having a story told to you. It's very focused on that story. I can get even fancier here, Tom. Check this out. And it is really, really, really well done, in my opinion. I did see some reviews out there that didn't love that it was so focused on narrative. Obviously, I've already told you my tilt on this, but it is really well done. It gives you this feeling of space flight. It gives you this kind of dogfighting combat maneuvers feeling. And I don't know that Tom has actually gotten far enough in the game. It does some wonderfully Star Wars-esque things of flying into bigger things, blowing up reactor cores, doing that kind of thing that I love. And this is my personal tilt, right? I love space. I love space combat. This is essentially space fantasy more than sci-fi. It's talking about magic and cults and things like that. But if you're at all interested in this, if you're at all interested in kind of just the concept of a space combat game that's reminiscent of the old PlayStation glory days of Psygnosis in its prime, I really do think Chorus, which is a budget title, is really thoroughly excellent and has earned every bit of its number 10 place on my list. Tom, how do you feel about Chorus?
Number 4.
What? Hold on. Everything changed just now. It's on your list in the 4 slot? I wasn't even ready for that box.
Yep. So first of all, I have an incredible tilt for space shooters, for space flight games. Like, they're probably one of my favorite genres, super underrepresented for a very long time. If we were doing this the year that Everspace released, I would have said that. I have very strong suspicion that whenever Everspace 2 releases, I'm going to say that is on my list. Um, I just I love space combat. Chorus does it very well. Its lore is a little bit odd and self-serious, and that's probably a turnoff for some people.
I think I call it po-faced. Yes, it's very earnest.
But at the same time, it lets you do like magic in your ship, so you like teleport and do like crazy stuff, which is really cool. So yeah, it definitely. I only started playing this a little bit ago. It has been mainly what I've been playing for the last week or so. I really like it, and it does some fun stuff that I love with space physics. So you're doing some like flipping around, so you're like moving one direction and shooting another, and I really love it. I could take or leave the narrative a little bit. I think something more digestible would probably be.
But can you whisper talk the rest of your review of Chorus?
Yeah, I know. It's just I love Chorus, and people won't understand this.
They won't understand this bit. So one of our most amusing parts of the way the story works is the internal monologue for the main character is told in very aggressive whispers, which I basically want to take into my own legal field and just have my own inner monologue just be very aggressively whispered at myself. So I'm working on that. That's going to take some training. But certainly, it's the kind of thing that might turn you off. I will say the actual space fighting, the way they've done the controls, the way they've used the rights, which are the magic spells, along with those, very, very cool feeling, very well done. And if you like these games, I don't know that I could recommend it more. Now, it is effectively open world, kind of. You'll get these kind of spots. This is the first system, and there'll be there'll be a star over here and a question mark you can go look at, and this will be a quest, and this will be a quest, and this will be the main storyline. So it is a little bit like your Far Cries or your Halo Infinites or your Ubi games in general, all in a spaceship. So that's Chorus. I actually can't believe this is wild to me. This is great. This is you've made the case for the mystery of your list already.
This is why we do this.
So yes, it is my number 10. And then I think the plan was, before I knew we were getting an entry so high on your list, was now after we talked about Chorus, hopefully sold it to people. Sean Hoeg here in the comments in the chat says Chorus has a demo on Steam. Check that out. My computer has no chance of running that. But I'm playing it on the Xbox Series X. It runs like a dream there, in case you're wondering. What's your number 10 game of 2021, Tomo?
I feel like I wanted to say something else about Chorus, but
no. Oh, sure.
It's cool. But yeah, definitely highly recommended for people like I said, space shooters. Just there aren't many, and there are even less good ones. There's been a few that I've been, well, not really even a few. Oh, I remember what I wanted. So there have been a few I've been excited for that ultimately disappointed. Sorry, my brain.
No, it's great.
Chorus is actually made by Fish Labs.
Yes. Is that a company I should know?
I know them because they used to make space shooters for mobile called Galaxy on Fire, which are actually pretty good. And there are PC versions of the voice acting and narrative is, it's not great, but the game itself is solid. And
I will say for Chorus's benefit, it is po-faced. It is self-serious. I find it to be well acted.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's good. I agree. And if you'd played Galaxy on Fire, it's nowhere near that kind of cheesy. What I was gonna say is Fish. Now I need to look into this. I don't know what I'm exactly talking about here, but I thought that Fish Labs became Rockfish and made Everspace, and that I guess isn't the case.
Okay.
Or some of the people from Fish Labs
Could
went
be an
and formed
offshoot.
Rockfish, and that's
offshoot.
so. I was just really surprised to see that. Thought that was interesting.
Well, I'm happy to get Everspace and Chorus. So a winner is us, I think, on that score. But yeah, Chorus was one of those that was pretty funny. I was playing it and I was like, I sent Tom a text. I said, try Chorus. And he's like, oh my God.
Yeah. I was like, why do I not, how do I not know about a next gen space shooter? In what world?
So highly recommended. Definitely if your computer can run the demo, there is no reason to not try it. You don't have to take our word for it. in my LeVar Burton stylings. You could check it out for yourself. But Chorus, I thought I was going to get chastised by my brother for putting up a game that I've only had for 2 weeks on the top 10 list. Instead, he puts it in the 4 spot. I love it. Now, what's your 10 spot?
Dungeon Encounters, all caps.
Dungeon Encounters,
all caps.
It's not
the
caps?
official. That's the official. The official title is in all caps.
We're gonna do this without caps.
We're going off the edge.
Yes, it's all fun and games live here. Let's see. Well, I need to make this smaller.
Oh God, what is happening? You guys are seeing behind the curtain. Look away.
Oh God, you're killing me. All right. Well, you know what? It's dungeons. It's dungeons now.
Dungeon X.
Anyway, so yeah, you're good God.
Oh God, it's getting worse. Oh, what is happening?
See, you try to do this stuff. This is live broadcasting. Leave me alone.
You've been screwing around too long. The chat is on you.
Now, it's fine. It's fine. Now here is where we get fun, right? Because I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think maybe we should just throw up my number 9 as it comes out, which means, buddy, you get the whole thing now.
Oh, I get that. Yeah, so Dungeon Encounters, I guess I'll start by saying it's not for everyone. I watched videos of it. I watched people playing it. I could not understand why people would do that. My wife looked over at one point and said, "Are you playing Sorry by yourself?" It is just it's super engaging for some reason. Like, you're putting together this little party and you're raising their levels and you're just kind of exploring this like huge dungeon. It like does what it says on the tin. Doesn't do a lot of fancy
Dungeon Encounters. Yes,
it doesn't do anything like really fancy beyond that. It's got an active battle system, which is super nostalgic in terms of like waiting for people's bars to fill and then doing their little attacks. And it's got a few interesting battle mechanics in terms of like things will have physical defense and magical defense and also their HP. So you're kind of encouraged to maintain sort of the ability to do.
Let's check that out a sec, because I think this is really the most engaging part, but it's also the reason why like my girls can't watch it. So this game lives entirely like in your head,
in your mind. Yes.
In how you're like framing this out. So this down here, you look like a broadsword. These symbols are all what kind of damage it's going to do. It's going to do physical, whether it has to be close combat, whether it's going to be random or specific. So a number of these are going to do a specific amount that you're guaranteed to get. But it's only ever that. And then there's another type of weapon that'll be a random number between, 1 and...
I believe it's 1 and whatever the high number is.
Yeah, so when we go back and we look at these encounters, they've got physical defense and magic defense. You can go either way. They're essentially 2 different shields. And then once you get through one of them, you can start hitting the HP. And they're doing stuff back to you at the same time. But it means that your group is going to have to manage these things, because what the game can do is it can just give you a group that's a super high magic defense. So if you built your team in the wrong way, then you're going to have a real problem with that particular encounter. And you're going to learn the encounters as you go through the dungeons, and they're going to be represented by these numbers, right?
Yep.
And this is the most boring thing in the world. This is the game that my girls won't let me play because they say, well, what is this even? But if you can get into it, if you can get into the headspace, then all of this is super cool. And it's all kind of just built on its own rules. It doesn't tell you how to do things. You just kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. These Z, Y, and X locators are telling you where people are. And if you lose a whole party, the game doesn't end. You go back to the academy with your lower level people, and you have to send out the group to try to bring the dead bodies home and get them back and going. And it's all just very evocative in a very old school way. And if you get into it, to me, it's like playing Civilization or something. I started playing it and it was midnight before I realized it. And that's one of my favorite things in games. If they can engage you at that level. And I just spent, 40 minutes at the top of this video telling you I'm a narrative guy. This has no narrative at all. This is purely systems. This is essentially, I believe it's the designer of Final Fantasy 12. coming in and saying, I got some cool ideas for systems. And this is effectively the resources Square gave him to go explore them. And I'm still happy they exist. I still think it's great. But yeah, these things are kind of nice looking. They're good art, and they'll bang into each other. The boxes will hit each other. So, it's animated. It's 2021. But I think this game is $20. Is it 20 or 30, Tom?
That's I mean, I can look it up on Steam. That's where
you
I
can
have
look it up. But I mean, it's a budget priced game, and it is so engaging, and it is so fun. And this looks procedurally generated. It's not. It's all handcrafted. They'll have specific things you can find that are riddles to where to locate special treasures that match the way that a specific dungeon looks, or other things. Throughout, you're going to get magic powers that let you go up and down dungeons that can get you to places that you couldn't otherwise reach in the level themselves. It is very, very engaging, even though it looks the way it looks. So
Dungeon
I'm thrilled.
Encounters is currently $24 on Steam.
$24. I highly recommend it, but you definitely need to know what you're getting into. It's only ever going to look this good, right? It's only ever going to look this way. And this is it. And most of your game is going to be spent in this kind of stuff, right? The reason I pulled up this slide is you're going to be evaluating these kinds of things, and it feels great to grow. If you like that feeling of growth in Dragon Quest, of being able to beat the things you couldn't beat before, and your people getting stronger, and having a little bit of edge of potential loss. Like if you're running with the last 3 people in your academy, if you lose those people, your game actually ends. And so you're like very careful and cautious in trying to sneak through and all these things. If you like the sound of that at all, highly recommend it. Pure mechanics, pure battle system, and it's my number 9 game of the year. It's Tom's number 10 through adventures in typeface, but it is Tom's number 10 to go with his number 4 of Chorus. So look at this, 2 entries in both lists. So we're doing all right. Anything to add on Dungeon Encounters?
No, I mean, I don't think so. Like I said, if you're looking at this, it is not compelling in video, screenshot. Like really, it's a game that lives in your head, and so I can't. You won't be able to see it before you are in it. And assuming that it's not for everybody, I apologize for the people that get into it and are like, this is stupid, I hate this. But Steam does have a 2-hour return policy, so get in there, give it a try.
Yeah, you'll be able to tell in 2 hours. I think you'll get into floor 1. You'll be able to see what it's all about. Somebody asked here, so there's necromancy for bringing them back. Is it necromancy? There's a resurrection shrine. It's the way a Dragon Quest works, or anything else. So you drag them back, and you say, yes, please resurrect that. It might be Pet Cemetery, depending on how it is. We can't tell. It's all just boxes.
But again, to Rick's point on like living in your head, the resurrection shrine is like 5, and the healing shrine next to it is a number 6.
Yeah. So this black number is an encounter, and it's an encounter that will always come from the same pool of enemies, and you'll be collecting a log, and it'll tell you what enemies can appear in that encounter. It's not identical. It's not the same every time, but you'll be able to know, okay, I have to avoid a 66 with this crew, but I can rock a 52. And you'll eventually know that the 2 is, I think, go upstairs, and 34 is something specific as well. And you can see you can't walk to this one, right? So you're going to have to come to it either from the upper floor or the lower floor. And if I sound excited about this stuff and you think this sounds ridiculous because you're looking at what I'm looking at, I totally get that. But when you're trying to get past these ghouls and you haven't been able to find the right weapon to do it, and you're growing and everything else, it is tremendously fulfilling to do. And every 10 levels, they change the background color. So, I mean, that's service. That's customer service for you. I think they also changed the background sound effects.
Yeah, so I do think there's definitely different battle music.
See, look at that. That's value. So no, like I said, my girls won't let me play this game. Don't understand it. I don't blame them one bit. Lives in the player's head. But if you're at all interested in it, if it sounds interesting, check it out. Gecko Gamer says in Super Chat, Dungeon Encounters looks like and sounds like an early Western RPG pre-Ultima 4. Yeah, I think of it as a mapping. It's one of those mapping dungeon games where it was just a town and it was just a dungeon, and you were mapping it on your graph paper. And fortunately, you don't have to do that for this game, but it's a similar kind of concept where the value is in just in your head. Oh, I'm going through a dungeon, I'm having these encounters, and I'm having a great time. I absolutely love it. One of my favorite games of the year, and one of Tom's favorite games of the year. So we're doing all right, which means because Tom took my number 9, he's also up again. Let's see if we can type it better.
I wasn't sure how we were doing this. Is it like
I got
lowest valid number?
Yeah,
all right,
I
know this won't appear on your list. So
okay.
Far Cry 6.
Far Cry 6. I'll see if I can pull up some pictures. Start talking about it.
Sure. I like Ubi game for what it's worth. I like the Far Cry series. I think when I first started playing this, kind of what I said to Rick is I think they're much more at home in kind of like the jungle. Like it feels like a very detailed space with full of a lot of different things to find and do. I feel better about fighting, the I don't know I can't remember what the name of the bad guys in 6 is over the sort of Peggies from 5.
Yeah, just the government.
So I dive in and I'm like, I'm only going to play it for a little bit, and I end up playing it for a long time. I am a person who chases bubbles, who like, there's a thing on the map, I'm going to go find it and then do that thing and then do the next thing and then do the next thing. It is certainly not without its flaws or weirdness in terms of like you've got a bunch of like animal companions that you're working with, and you also have a backpack that can like fire missiles. I mean, it's over the top, almost Just Cause levels of kind of like zany.
It is almost Just Cause levels in part.
I think it's really fun. And also I think their economy is really good. So you're getting a nice drip feed of new attachments and new weapons and new things to try. Your inventory feels constantly too small to kind of have everything that you want, which I personally feel is great. The combat, it feels the best that they've done so far.
Now so devil's advocate here. So some people say Far Cry 6, which has like now the not armored and armored ammo and keeping track of that kind of stuff, detracts from the overall experience. Do you have any feelings on that, game designer?
I don't mind it. I actually kind of like it, but it does restrict your loadouts a little bit because you're like, oh, I need some way to deal with soft targets and hard targets. Kind of. I actually feel like it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't push enough. Like I often have a armor piercing silent something, and I can usually use that to take out huge portions of an encounter because a headshot with an armor piercing weapon is still a kill. Doesn't matter. Like, and that works on soft targets and hard targets. Because it doesn't matter. So I don't know. I don't like artificial hard counters or hard locks personally.
I know you've said that before.
So I don't love that. But I don't hate it either.
Okay. Very non-committal. Well, I mean, to me, the reason it was on my honorable mention list is not the combat, is not the shooting, which I find to be fine. It was that I thought the world was well realized. I agree with you that fighting on an island chain feels right for Far Cry. It felt right in the original. It felt right in 3. It feels right in 6. And then this combines that with the notion in Far Cry 4 of toppling a regime, which I think in terms of the game that they have built of what a Far Cry is, toppling a regime is the thing that makes the most sense. Much like Just Cause, causing chaos, doing things around the island, getting people upset with what is being offered to them makes the most sense for what you're actually doing. More sense than like being in Montana and dealing with those kinds of situations.
If I had one complaint so far, it's, well, 2 complaints, I guess. It's probably that the structure is too similar to 5, in my opinion. It's like, here's the 3 lieutenants, and you're going to go to their areas, and you're going to do stuff, and then you're eventually going to fight the lieutenant, which I don't even think like previous Far Cries exactly did. So it felt like very, very similar to 5. And also there's just not enough, and I'm going to butcher this, Giancarlo Esposito. You only really get him in a few scenes, and then mostly through like over like PA systems and stuff.
He does do announcements.
And I think some more interaction with him would be great. And maybe I'm going to get some. They're big games. I finished one area or one like lieutenant.
Yeah, UB does not make their screenshots very easily found. So they like movies and video. So I got one screenshot just at the time that we're ending our conversation. So I
Nice.
feel like I nailed it.
Nice.
But yeah, I agree with you, except that they also do one of my favorite things in video games, which is the way that you get those scenes at all are like the check-ins with how the evil baddies are feeling about what you're doing. And I used to love these in an old game series called the Strike games. Urban Strike, Jungle Strike, Desert Strike, where you would essentially have cutscenes in between your levels about how the bad guys feel about you destroying all their stuff. I've always liked that.
That
And
Saturday morning cartoon.
Starscream.
Oh
Yes,
God,
exactly.
we both did that.
We did the same one. It's good. We're
both
brothers.
Oh dear.
So I think that plays pretty well, and you do go through significant things in the various aspects of Yara / Cuba,
Yara.
and then that's when a scene will pop up of the lieutenant saying, "We're doing our best against the crazy person," and then he'll shoot someone. And I think that's well done. He's obviously a very charismatic and captivating actor, and I think he does well in the game. But yeah, he's kind of the ghost presence. He's the emperor while you're otherwise handling things. But I think even in that context, Ubisoft has gone farther with putting character around their missions in Far Cry 6. The way that they're delivered to you, I think works better. You have a little bit more context, even if, end of the day, mostly it's burn all the trucks or shoot all the people or whatever it's going to be. They add that context. I think it works well. I do have a little bit more of a problem with the ammo switches than you do. I also have a little bit more of a problem with the tonal shifts, right? You do get Giancarlo doing really bad stuff in his scenes and being evil and dark and oppressive and setting up a very serious kind of context. And then in the game, you're getting wacky chicken races and you're getting hitting things with fireworks and you're getting goofballs all over the place. And that's what Far Cry has become, but it really doesn't pick a lane and they don't really gel terribly well together. So it's interesting that you just kind of do both at the same time, when I think one or the other would have been maybe a little bit better, although I don't think they want to become Just Cause. The last thing I will say is it is maybe my favorite intro video of any video game this year. If you haven't played it, Far Cry 6 begins with what amounts to a Netflix kind of premiere television introduction with some really cool music and like some nice weird artistry, almost like a James Bond kind of thing with like montages of what is happening on the island. And honestly, one of the things I wound up thinking is I wish I could play the game with that tone like the whole time because it's very kind of cool. And Far Cry 6 is not the game that introduction kind of promises.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Actually, I had that as more of a complaint in 5, which I think was even more sort of like mission to mission can be zany. You're dealing with like this drunken idiot or some.
You do a lot of that, yeah.
And then you go through a cinematic where like someone's tortured, and it's like this is really dissonant. So I can see that. I think Far Cry 6 does a better job. I think even the sort of zany stuff that I've done so far, it's sort of like it's part of the stuff you're doing for the resistance, and it like has some sensibility. Like for example, you do these things called supply runs or whatever, where you have to get a car from A to B in a certain amount of time, or whatever. Actually, that's not even what I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is these like checkpoint things that you have to do where you like fly a plane through a bunch of things or a wingsuit or whatever. And in Far Cry 6, they're kind of like resistance training things that you have to do, and they kind of feel in world. In Far Cry 5, they were like some Evil Knievel character who you were basically like pretending to be. And so like it feels like at least 6 is a little bit. I think you're right. I'd still steer it a little bit more probably serious because I think they actually do a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, I think their serious stuff is good. It's just wild. It's out of nowhere.
But yeah, I really enjoy it minute to minute. And I guess the ammo thing doesn't bother me. I haven't noticed it a lot. I don't know if I'm just like cool with switching really fast or if it's just like I don't care that much. Like, oh, I'm not doing full damage to this guy. Cool, I'll just lay into him. Like whatever.
Yep. I mean, I think
they're like soft counters, not like hard counters. It's not like, you can't kill this guy if you don't have the right ammo.
I don't think a Far Cry game in general is what I would describe as hard. It's mostly putting the time in and working through them. So I think that's a fair comment. But I do know people have complained about it. So I wanted to ask you the question because it appears on your list and it is in my honorable mention list. So we do have a non-match here, in case you thought that we had somehow coordinated this. We did not. But I do really like Far Cry 6. I do enjoy it thoroughly. Anything else?
No, I think we got that one. I think we hit that one pretty good.
Okay, well then, by the way we're doing this, it's time for my number 8. You have any guesses what might be 8?
Me?
Yeah, just curious.
I feel like if I guess, I'm giving away my list a little bit.
So all right, then don't guess. Don't guess. All right, my number 8, I think, is wildly underrepresented on end of the year game lists. It is one of my favorite. I think it's imaginative, and it just announced that it's coming out on Switch next year, so I can't recommend it more. It is the game Wildermyth. And if you don't know anything about this, I can't blame you, because I don't think that anybody has said much of anything about it, at least until the award season, where people have been mentioning it a little bit more. Wildermyth is, unlike Dungeon Encounters, a procedurally generated RPG thing that allows you to make all these characters in very detailed formulations and figure out exactly what their relationships are, what they're going to be, and work through an RPG that is essentially built out of a set of, I don't know what you'd call them, modules that are written to allow your characters that you've created to interact based on the personalities you've given in specific ways that set the story going in a specific path. And if that sounds like too much procedural generation that it couldn't possibly work, I agree with you. The trick to Wildermyth is that it's a great game that it does work in. And they just had some brilliant ideas to put their cutscenes in this kind of comic book form that can adapt to what characters you create and fill these things out. They even have modules that I think allow you to kind of write in on yourself these kinds of storylines. And so it means that you've got a great RPG that you're playing with really interesting characters and mechanics that's fully functional in a kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an XCOM light type of way. These are essentially treated as paper crafts that kind of bang into each other, but still look pretty cool. It's got a 3D, 2D thing going on. And I can't guarantee your game or your story will be awesome in any given instance. I can guarantee it will be unique, and unique in such a way that it can be really, really interesting and fulfilling, and in a manner that I can't say is identical to any other game I've ever played. So if that interests you at all, an RPG, and there's some other strategy things, I didn't pull up a picture of the strategy map, unfortunately, that you're walking through various areas. You've got a kind of, again, an XCOM strategic to go with a tactical kind of concept, but with characters that you created for yourself. If you like any of that, I couldn't recommend it more. It works terribly well. And it doesn't, it's the kind of game that my computer can play. It doesn't tax it too hard. It just provides good times and cool stories. And I have to thank my brother who had it on his computer and shared it with me, or else I might not have known about it. What do you think, Tom?
Wildermyth did not make my list.
Okay. Cool.
It's wrong, but that's fine. I respect and like the things that you pull out, actually, about the story generation, its ability to do the story generation and character interactions and stuff. I think the big downside for me is I don't like the core combat really very much. I think it's muddy and kind of hard to, like, you compare it to XCOM, which I think has a very strong combat engine, and I think this one is kind of like, maybe okay. You're doing kind of some weird stuff.
Functional.
Sometimes you just get RNG'd in an unfortunate way, which I guess is XCOM, but I feel like it's even less preventable here because there's not really like cover or much awareness. Like the maps are really small. You kind of just like stumble into a guy and suddenly you're all wailing on each other.
Yeah, it's lighter in design than XCOM, I think, by choice. I mean, they're more interested, if you have to just define Wildermyth by a sentence, they're more interested in telling a story and than they are in this aspect of it. So this is kind of more lightly designed to be a little bit more beer and pretzels, popcorn, whatever word you use for that, than something that's like knee deep in the weeds. And it's so that makes it a little bit more fuzzy around the edges.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I would prefer Wildermyth if it had like Dungeon Encounters battle system. I think would have been more appealing to me. I don't think the tactical layer is particularly good or fun. I don't like it, and it's a lot of what you're doing.
It's prettier than Dungeon Encounters.
You're kind of guiding your way through these stories, but then they almost all resolve with like, now I'm fighting this thing.
Yeah, they do. There's a lot of fighting as the resolution of these things, definitely. But it's hard to put into words exactly the kind of ownership that you have when you've built these things up they've developed these relationships. You're going to answer these kinds of things, and then somebody's going to become agitated with somebody else, and that's going to all go into your history in a way that I think people build in their minds for something like XCOM, and this one kind of takes that as the jumping off point and does something that I think is even potentially a little bit cooler. Anything else, Tom?
No. I think that's totally fair. I recognize it. It definitely was on my list of things to consider. So, and obviously I played it. I hooked you up with it, and you ran with it.
I ran with it. Yeah. Is this story equivalent of Darkest Dungeon? No, they have big pack. I mean, the easiest way to think about this is almost like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of book with like scenarios attached to it. So it's pulling things that are already built to give you these stories when you're going to a new tower or whatever, with an overall plot line that's built from the book that you selected. So Dungeons and Dragons, Hero Quest, if you're familiar with how that works, it's more along those lines, and it means that I can't tell you how any given campaign, which is a little bit lofty of a word for what they are, will go for you, but it doesn't have a story long game of that type. So it's a different animal than a Darkest Dungeon, definitely. And with that, I think what we can do is we can move on to, we don't have your number 8 yet, right?
I think
so let's get your number 8 in there.
So this one's a little weird one because it came out this year, but I think I started playing it like 2 years ago. Griftlands.
Griftlands. Did that come out of early access this year?
It did. It came out of early access this year.
Okay, I think I can find pictures of that.
I think it started like 2 years ago.
All right, well, talk to us about what the heck a Griftland is.
So it's by Clay. So the art is fantastic.
What does Clay make?
Clay is Don't Starve, Oxygen Not Included, the one where you've got the 2 knives that I can't remember right now, Mark of the Ninja. Like, they have a very distinct style. The knives guy one, it's like a silly title. It's like Brawn or like Stab or something. Invisible Ink, highly underrated. If you've never played Invisible Ink, you should go play it. It's great. Shank, that's what it is. Thank you, Sean. So anyway, their art's fantastic. It's I guess what I'm going to call, it's one of these roguelike deck builders. Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire is really the most obvious one, but basically where you get a hand of 5 cards and you're trying to manage like what the other team is doing. This one's interesting in that it has 2 different kind of battle systems. What Rick's showing right here is a physical battle. You're actually like fighting something, but actually probably the majority of your battles are like arguments. So it's the same concept. There'll be kind of like things that the other guy's trying to argue, and you're trying to kind of like there's the arguments battle, and you're trying to
I got your back, man.
You're trying to like undermine or like defeat their arguments, and you use that to convince characters to do things for you. There's a great minor spoiler. There's one enemy you fight where you can kind of give him basically like a crisis of conscience right before you fight by doing one of these conversation battles first. And it's really well put together. It's a really solid sort of deck builder thing. There's got a lot of interesting cards and synergies. I actually think it also tells like an interesting story and has, you get different quests you can go on that tie to it. You can basically kill or befriend any character, and that will cause other characters to feel differently about you and kind of affect how your game plays out. I really love it. I want to spend more time with it. It's got, I think, like 3 or 4 stories, which are pretty large, and I've only ever played the first one.
Yeah,
and not to completion.
Yeah, that have like their baseline powers. Yeah, well, I think it's a good pick. I like Griftlands a lot. It didn't even cross my mind because it was out in early access for so long. That's the problem with early access. I didn't even think that it released this year necessarily, but I think it's a good pick, definitely. That's it. That's all the screenshots I got.
Cool.
So that's a good number 8, I think, and a lot of fun. So I think that's a great choice, Tomo.
Thanks. I appreciate your
I know
encouragement.
you're constantly craving my affirmation. I know that about you.
Yeah, that's all we talk about.
So, all right, let's hit number 7. My number 7, Tales of Arise. So, as you can probably tell from my description of myself, love a narrative as I do, I love RPGs. And I've loved the Tales series for a long time. Tales is that kind of beer and pretzels popcorn RPG. Chances are when you start a Tales game, and even if you just watch the intro video to it, you know 90% of what's going to happen, the fights that are going to happen, who the bad guys are, who the good guys are, fire and ice, light and dark, all that kind of stuff. The details will change, and that's where some of the fun lives. But a Tales of Arise game isn't designed to surprise. It isn't designed to be controversial or anything like that. It's designed to do what it says on the tin. Here's a anime-based JRPG of an old school variety, the kind you've been playing since the PlayStation at least. And now with Tales of Arise, with something that is approaching modern graphics. In fact, it's one of the prettiest games of the year, in my opinion. And so you combine those things with a game type that I already liked and a graphic system, which I believe is also used in another RPG that didn't make my list called Scarlet Nexus, which I also really enjoyed. And you get exactly what I want out of a specific type of role-playing game, which is, battles against monsters, light versus dark, good versus evil, rebellions versus empires, and now with graphics that are as good as anything on the system, in my opinion. So Tales of Arise, pretty simple to explain. It's the same kind of combat system that prior Tales of game done better. It's the same kind of bright colored monster-based, dungeon-based graphics, only done better. It's the same kind of anime tropey characters, only done better, especially if you like Final Fantasy. You'll get Jesse from Final Fantasy VII Remake as well as Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 as your leads. And it's just a good time. Now, it's not higher on my list, despite my love of RPGs, because it gets a little bit, I don't want to even say repetitive, but it's just so clear as to what direction you're going that it is simplistic enough that it doesn't rise to the level of what surprise and controversy can get to you. So it sits nicely here as one of my favorite games of the year. Never really challenged me in terms of narrative or things like that. So a lot of cool skits, what they call in the Tales series, with interactions between characters, a lot of good mechanics, a lot of great graphics, and some good voice acting. And that makes it my number 7 game of the year. Tom, you watched me play some Tales. I know you don't love it like I do.
I don't
what
even
is
know
the
if
thought
I
of
watched.
What?
I don't even know if I watched you play the game proper. I watched you
Just
play
the
the
demo?
demo,
All
which I think is a little bit messy because it's trying to show you so much that it.
Oh yeah, I hate those demos. I
Makes
hate
no
demos
sense.
that just kind of launch you into the full featured battle set. I need those early sequences to get me up to speed for the 17 things that I can do when I'm fully powered. So you can speak to the graphics, but outside of that, I know you don't love Tales like I do. Did you wind up even giving this one a try?
I did not actually. I have not played it beyond I did try the demo a little bit. I think the battle system seems solid. It's gorgeous. There's no argument that it's gorgeous. But even in the demo, there's a little bits. I was like, I don't know if this narrative is going to be something that I'm super going to like. And I feel like an RPG lives so much on that, like a JRPG in particular. So I never really engaged with. I've never engaged with any of the Tales games, to be honest.
I like this is funny. If you watch these chats,
I am.
I liked it, but was disappointed. It's long in the tooth. This is as simplistic as Dragon Quest. It's the most tropey and everything wrong with modern anime that turns people off with constant stopping to re-over explain. I obviously wouldn't go quite that far. I will say it definitely does suffer from the, I don't know what you'd say. It's like, you know what you're going to do in the city. You know what you're going to accomplish. You know how you're going to beat these bad guys, whatever. And you'll get 7 conversations that talk about the same thing, give or take, over and over and over again, which can be okay if you add a little bit something new, but it definitely explores whatever it is that you're gonna be doing in that scene. So I do agree with that. Which character do I main for comment? Tales games, I'm bad. I'm always whoever they put me in as first. I feel like Tales of Arise was a game I tried and didn't get into for some reason. Yeah, I mean, I think it starts off pretty slow. It starts off in one specific area of a very specific type, fighting fairly simplistic enemies. So I don't blame anybody for having that particular bounce off of it. I was excited for it. I like Tales games. Again, it's very tropey. I'm not going to disagree with that. It's kind of what it sells you is you know what you're going to get. It's going to be some new locations. There's going to be some wonder and awe, some cool cities, some cool graphics. But it's not what you buy to be surprised or challenged in the storytelling. So I get all those complaints. They just don't rise to the level, no pun intended, of keeping it off my list.
Yeah, it's funny actually, as I was putting together my list, and we'll talk about this more, I think, as we go. Some of my higher entries, I think, have very strong narratives. And that's pretty uncommon these days, it feels like. And it's definitely not something that I don't focus on it in terms of like has to be a good narrative to be a good game. And I think that didn't always used to be the case. And Tales of Rise strikes me as one that may have like solid gameplay, gorgeous graphics, but doesn't tell a story that I'm like super excited about.
You're going to go collect the energy orbs and take down the bad guy. You know what it is. It's Tales of Arise. I did see someone else mention that the music is great. I should have mentioned that. The music is fantastic in Tales of Arise. So that should be mentioned as well. But again, it's interesting. Number 7, very high in my list. I don't know that there's a ton to talk about. It's a Tales game with a new graphics engine, which is what I wanted. And so it delivered on that promise of everything that could be. So that's my number 7, which brings us back, I think, to your list, your number 7. I have to pull this thing back up here.
Well, it's cool. It does, because I'm going to talk first. I see the chat kind of talking about, he talked about it. Don said Intergrade was his like favorite RPG of the year. So just so you know how, at least Rick and I didn't agree on rules for how this would work.
I said it was your top 10 experiences.
I made my own rules, which were basically remasters and next-gen upgrades were only eligible for honorable mention. So any of the next-gen upgrades couldn't be in there. Intergrade, for instance, is a next-gen upgrade of Final Fantasy VII, which was, I think, Rick's number 2 or something last year.
It was 2.
I didn't get it on my list because I didn't get around to playing it. It's a great upgrade. It's a great game, but I don't consider it something that I could put on this list. Anything
Stay tuned.
Anything in early access was only eligible for honorable mention, but things that released from early access, like Griftlands, could be on the list. So that's just some of the things that I considered for what it's worth. So I guess that's just my caveat.
You don't have to defend yourself.
Maybe it should have come at the beginning. I don't know. Whatever.
I think it's great. What's your 7?
Loop Hero.
Hey, I'm glad I mentioned it in my won't appear list because I know you were trying to get me to play it. So,
Don's okay. Intergrade he's talking about the Yuffie stuff.
Well, Intermission. So Don, just be clear. Intergrade is the remaster. Intermission is the Yuffie stuff. So, we need you to be getting the Square Enix naming conventions correct.
Also, because Rick's going to put the intermission stuff on his list.
Wait, are you suggesting that I know that the Yuffie DLC is called Intermission for some reason? I don't. Well, who are you? So Loop Hero. Well, first, let's hit Gecko Gamer again with another super chat. Thanks so much. Any ideas for a beginner JRPG for someone who only played Pokemon and constantly bounces off of Octopath Traveler? Well, I mean, Octopath would have been a good choice for beginner RPG, I think. Dragon Quest is really where I send people. My older daughter is playing Dragon Quest right now, loves them on the DS. They are very easily understood in terms of battle system, and that can be very important. They also have a very traditional fairy tale kind of approach to storytelling. So I definitely recommend Dragon Quest, probably over Final Fantasy if you're just trying to get somebody new into things. Outside of that, there's other kind of Pokemon analogs. Monster Hunter Stories has a kind of Pokemon approach to things, but it can be a little bit more difficult in my opinion. I think that's the kind of thing I would look at. Ni no Kuni is one that my daughters love. You're going to say Ni no Kuni? Okay.
Yeah. I thought those are pretty, those are on the easy side. They're on the cute side. I think they do a decent job of telling story. Obviously, Studio Ghibli creates like really pretty stuff.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, it's not too demanding like some RPGs really can be. That one.
Well, don't start with Shin Megami Tensei 5. I can promise you that. That game, it makes my mind melt. So it's don't start with those.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big JRPG person, so I don't have a lot of nominations there, but definitely, yeah, Ni no Kuni, I think.
I am.
Yep. At some point, Rick and I split. We both were JRPG when JRPG was basically all you could play on like consoles as RPGs, and then now I've become more kind of a Western RPG person.
That's right. We lost Tom. It's okay. All right. So what do we got on this thing? I'm looking at pictures of mine.
So Loop Hero, it's another kind of roguelike. God, I don't even know how to define this exactly. It's like part puzzle, part deck building, part idle game.
Idle game? Okay.
Yeah. So like the way that the game works is you've got a little hero. So the narrative is like the world has been obliterated and you're trying to kind of rebuild it from memory.
Okay.
The hero wanders around the titular loop, which is what you're seeing a lot here. It starts as just a ring of road, and then you start putting things on it and around it for your hero to encounter. And the goal is to basically strengthen your hero so they're big enough to fight the boss at the end of whatever particular scenario you're in. So it's this, you're kind of like trying to push the hero as hard as you can to gain levels and equipment and things like that, and also not kill them. At the same time, outside of that, there's sort of a meta progression where you've got a little village that you're building up that gives you access to more classes and more starting stuff. Little things like that.
It's very brown.
Yeah, so there's that's the city, which acts like kind of a skill tree. So also as you're doing things, you're collecting resources from each of your runs, which you bring back here, and they give you kind of benefits that you can take from run to run.
Okay.
So I guess it's a roguelike. It's kind of a puzzle game. It's a little bit of resource management.
Your articulation of this thing is fascinating.
It's weird.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think it just got. Speaking of things that got added to consoles, I think this just got added to Switch recently.
The tower defense comparison from the chat is fair. Like I think that's like you're setting things up and then you're just kind of watching them play out and then setting more things up. It's got an 8-bit style that I think is actually fun. It's got some weird synergies that you can find based on the class of character you're playing and the way you've built your deck.
Okay.
So
I know people really love this. Can you, separating from the game mechanic, can you articulate people have called this game addictive. People have said that they've really gotten into it. What's driving you to play this? Like, why does it work?
It's very flowy. What did you bring up that you said had
Civilization
really
is what
I think like
use.
Dungeon Encounters. I think you were talking about like had a really good flow where you just kind of get into it and you keep doing it. So this is like you have kind of a strategy. You're constantly getting dealt these cards that you're using to kind of build up the thing. I don't even know what you'll call it, world. And there's just a rhythm to it that feels really good. Also, at some point, you're gonna get to the point where you actually need like specific resources a lot. So you're looking for, all right, how do I create situations that are going to generate those resources in the world? So I need to spawn certain enemies and kill them in certain ways and things like that. And so there's just a lot of interesting puzzle there. And I think just kind of watching the hero walk around and it's almost got a city builder feel to it where you're sort of watching it play out the machine that you've built.
Oh, that's nice.
But writ small,
Okay.
Each run is less than an hour probably.
All right. Would you recommend it for somebody like me?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think Loop Hero is great. I think a lot of people could find something to enjoy in it. It is a roguelite. There's a lot of those. If that's not your cup of tea, this isn't going to change it.
Yes, we have a comment that says it's actually a roguelite. I've had this conversation with my brother. He doesn't really believe that pure roguelikes exist anymore. that they're so few and far between that there isn't some kind of meta progression, that the distinction is not worthwhile in making. I believe that's how you framed it to me before. So that's why he used roguelike right there, even though he was also describing meta progression at the same exact time.
Yes, I don't do those two. There might be a roguelike every once in a while. Pretty much everything that falls into that category is a roguelite. They have some sort of meta progression that you're dealing with because that's interesting. I think that's generally like how the genre has evolved.
I agree.
So it seems weird to have that distinction, but yes.
All right. Well, I haven't played this one. You've made me interested. I'm going to look to see what it costs on my Switch, I think, after we get done with this broadcast. Because one thing that didn't make my list, which I really enjoyed from the last week, is Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, which is like a mix of a roguelite and a drop-down puzzle game, which is really, really interesting and fun. Highly recommend it, but I've played it for 2 hours. Can't make it on even an honorable mention list. So this kind of thing is exactly what I'm looking for from there. So I'll give it a shot. Who knows? You might not be wrong.
I think this is on the Switch now. I think it was coming to the Switch.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a pretty good Switch game also. Something you can kind of do and not like 100% focus on.
All right. Well, I think that's a good number 7. So your list is weird, but it's coming together. So right now, since I'm not gonna pull it up right now, but your Loop Hero, Griftlands, Far Cry 6, and Dungeon Encounters, it's like a bunch of oddball indies and then just Far Cry 6 sitting out there hanging out in the middle of that bottom half. So I love it. I think we're putting together some interesting stuff here, including my number 6, Forza Horizon 5. I don't know if you all are familiar with this kind of Forza series. You drive cars around, and those cars get you to places and win you more cars. And so that's proven to be a lot of fun. Interestingly enough, and I think Tom can vouch for me here, I've loved the Forza Horizon series basically since it started, at least since Forza Horizon 2. And one of the interesting things that's happened in the kind of conversation this year is this notion that Forza Horizon 5 is like deserving of best game of the year. It got these huge ratings. And I look at it and I say, yeah, Forza Horizon 5 is Forza Horizon is always awesome, but I don't see it as that much better or different than Forza Horizon 4, which was in England and had the various seasons. Forza Horizon 5 being in Mexico is kind of a great location for the series because it does have wild and varied biomes. You get to go through a bunch of these different places. I do think they have changed up the way that they're essentially meta progressing you to various races and events in a way that I think is slightly better. It's just tweaked enough that it drives people, no pun intended, to where they want them to go and doing the things within the environment that they want them to be doing, the developers, in a way that maybe is a little bit more obvious and a little bit more clear than they were doing for Forza Horizon 4 and 3. But as a whole, I look at Australia, I look at England, I now look at Mexico, and they're all of a piece. It wasn't like there was this giant leap forward to me with Forza Horizon 5, which is why it's 6 and not 1 or something. But I absolutely love these games. To me, they have always been what I call like a party in a box. And people ask me, what do I chill out with after a work day or things like that? And Horizon is one of those types of games because you sit back, you turn on the radio, you go to various driving events, and you're calm, you're having a great time. If you're getting into the racing zen, it can just take over, much like these other games that we've talked about. I did a 25-minute race in Forza Horizon 5, and you just get used to following the corners and everything else. And it's all very relaxing. You get some party music on. And I really love it as an experience. So it is absolutely, it was always going to be in my top 10. Here it sits at number 6. It's on Game Pass. Have you played Forza Horizon 5, Tom?
I have actually. It's a beautiful showpiece. I'm not big on racing games in general, though I think it does a nice, it's in the continuum of like super technical versus super arcadey. It's a nice middle ground, which I like because I can't stand the like super technical stuff. It's just not my thing. It is the best I think that Forza Horizon has been. I think it's one of the best racing games. I think it's very fun to kind of do. I spend a few minutes in there and I'm like, I want to play something else. Okay. So that's nothing.
Funny because it's one of the games that I could just play all night. Like I have to be careful when I turn it on because I'm probably not popping out of there.
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't grab me. But I recognize the positives that it has. Like it's well put together. It's a bit of an Ubi game, right? We're still like going around and like collecting things.
Built into a lot of game types now. So no, I hear you. And again, much like Tales of Arise, I think it kind of speaks for itself. It's very high end graphics. It's even more tweaked from what Forza Horizon 4 was. And so it's an iterative kind of thing. I do miss the snow. So I don't think wet and dry in Mexico is quite as magical as the seasons in England were, which is just the nature of climes. But I think Mexico is a great place to do the races. I think they have a little bit more narrative, I'm going to use as a term, but just a little bit more context around some of the stuff that they ask you to do. And they've gotten a little bit better with how it's not exactly a battle pass, but how their dailies and weeklies and things drive you down than even Forza Horizon 4 was. So I understand that it's iteratively better. It just didn't seem like a leap to me. It's still fantastic. It's still one of the best racing experiences that you can get on any system or anywhere in video gaming. But it is just off the top 5 for me personally. And that's Forza Horizon. So I'm glad you like it, Tom. I'm glad you gave it a shot, honestly, because I think it's worth it. I think it's worthwhile to get that shot. But I understand you not loving racing games, certainly. Now, you know what time it is, Tom.
My number 6?
You have to give me your number 6. A great time will be had by all.
Inscription.
Oh, see, this is where Inscription I was using as my Tom's going to bring up some weird stuff. I know it's spelled weird. Did I get that right?
Yep, you got it right. Scry. Okay. It's got Scry in the middle.
It's not Forza Horizon 5, though, so let's get that off there. So Inscription's your number 6. And I guess, because this is what everybody has told me, without spoiling it, which strikes me as an odd disclaimer for what appears to be a card game, talk to me about Inscription.
So, one, I would say that the core card game that it has, which it does a lot with, is good. Like, it's a solid system that it's cool to build decks in. It's actually telling a story. I think at least what I haven't watched the trailer in Steam in a while, but so they keep so much behind the curtain that what you see in the trailer is just like the tip of the iceberg.
Bare minimum.
And it goes really interesting, weird places. I think that and this is one that I like couldn't put down. I would like start playing the card game and do it, make my way through it, and also uncovering little bits of the plot, which is like pretty interesting. It's just I love it. Like it's great. It's weird. The music is off-putting. It's sort of got like a horror unsettling element that it wants for you.
Consider me pelts.
And so much so that like my wife and I are playing in the same space a lot, and I have to play this with headphones on because she finds the music anxiety provoking.
Okay.
Because it's designed to make you feel uncomfortable and stuff. But oh look, A's watching the feed. Like A's in the feed and telling me how she hates the music in the game. Hi, honey.
Look at that. We have 3 Hoegs.
So, but also it's got this like standing up and walking around the escape room kind of thing and doing stuff that's like also in there. Like it's this also weird mishmash. Like and I can't get into any.
I was gonna say I will say people have recommended this to me like all year, or at least since it released. And the one thing they say is like I can't tell you anything about it, which is a tough sales pitch to me. But like all of them are, if I tell you anything, it'll be bad. Okay. It looks like I don't know what to think about a screenshot like this. Like this is the first main screenshot. There's a couple of squirrel cards and you're holding a couple of like forest animal cards and there's like a crazy forest man. I don't know what to do with this, Tom.
No, and what I will say is like this is all like I thought, okay, that's the game. And then it goes places.
That's what see, You're just as inscrutable as everybody else. It's like, it goes places. Okay.
But okay, so like so I can say this, I think, and I haven't finished it. I don't
Okay.
know exactly where it goes, but like you compared it to Frog Fractions in terms of like it starts.
That's what people told me it was like. Yeah.
And goes to a place where you're like, wait, what the hell?
Okay.
But what I would say is where Inscription goes is like fun and interesting, and Frog Fractions just gets weird.
Okay.
Like you're like managing pornography production for frogs on the moon or whatever, if I remember correctly. The Inscription stays a little bit tighter as far as I can tell in terms of what it's telling, and you start seeing what the story is.
Okay.
So
now a map like this to me looks like a Slay the Spire kind of concept.
Yep, 100%. But yeah, okay, I can't. This part of the game plays like that. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good enough for me. But you'd recommend it to people? Do you have any caveats to that recommendation?
If you don't like sort of card game deck builders, you're not gonna like it.
Okay. So it does at its core, regardless of it goes places or anything else. At its core, you got to have some love of a deck building.
Well, and I think that's to its credit. Is this card game, like in all the pieces that I've played of it, is still the core of the mechanic.
Okay.
Luckily it's a good card game in my opinion that does well. Whereas like a Frog Fractions or I'm going to forget the name of this one, like Pony Island, are more about being crazy and weird, but not necessarily having a good underlying game. Inscription is a good game that then goes in a weird way, which is great.
Okay. Well, I do want you to know that I know you. And when I was testing out how to even fill out your list on the fly while doing this, it was weird stuff, Inscription was what I had practiced. So
what's so funny is I was late to the Inscription bandwagon. I was on my wish list for a while, but like I found the screenshots and the trailers and stuff like off-putting. I was like, I don't know. Eventually I was like, all right, I've heard good things. A lot of people really like it. I'm going to do it. And then I was in.
All right. Well, look, your recommendation, that's pretty high. I'm probably going to buy it. But yeah, it's been one of those where it's like, it's constantly on my list and I don't know. Screenshots look weird. I'm going to be honest. So, okay. You're number 6, 5 more to go. We're doing good. In terms of time, we're going to run probably 3 hours here, but it's okay.
That's what I had cleared.
We're having fun. Also, we've been floating around 100 watching, which I think is pretty cool. So thanks to everybody. Don't forget to like. Hate to be that YouTuber. I got 63 likes. I got 98 viewers. You can make it happen. I know you can. But let's talk about my next entry, which is, I wonder why I knew this, Yuffie, or Yuffie, as it turns out, which is actually Final Fantasy VII Intermission out of the Intergrade package, Never Change Square Enix. We're lucky it's not 358/2-alpha 1Z or what have you. And yes, Tom asked me the question when we were putting this letter together, or this list together, could we have DLC? Could we have director's cuts that included significant DLC? And I was saying, yeah, if it was one of your best experiences, like I had already played Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was my number 2 game of last year. I knew I loved the mechanics. I knew I loved how this game was put together. And I didn't know about the DLC for Yuffie even when it happened. So I get this game. I'm playing it. It's probably realistically something like 8 to 10 hours of content just by itself. But because they are very judicious with what their hard mode does, with the mini game that they have in there, I don't know if I brought up a picture of Fort Condor, which I love to death. That the mini game they have in there, which is kind of really low key tactical strategy game, I actually wound up playing this DLC, which I felt made it eligible for this list, for about 27 hours. And if you can get that out of a DLC, then you did all right on the value proposition. So to talk about this without spoiling anything, because this isn't a spoiler cast, this is a DLC that uses a character from the original Final Fantasy VII from the late 1990s and tells a story about them going through the city of Midgar, the main city in the first part of Final Fantasy VII, at the same time that the cast was going through it in the game that you just played last year. And it integrates, no pun intended again, incredibly well with that concept. You get kind of instances of the other party coming through your storyline. And more importantly, it presents a new character as designed completely from a different perspective as the other players that you've played as in the Final Fantasy VII main game. So if you don't know anything about this project, they've basically worked on each individual character and giving them their own mechanics as to how they use the battle system. And Yuffie is no different. Yuffie uses what they call ninjutsu to use elements on different attacks that you have to manage at the same time. You can use an attack to essentially put her projectile, whatever that might be at the point in time that you're playing the game, against somebody, suppressing them, holding them down, which changes her entire attack patterns. And now, as you can see from the screenshot on your screen, you can actually combine with another character in the game and get stronger things, but also use that to control whether they're attacking or not attacking, and adds an entirely new level of strategic gameplay on actually playing the battles in this game. And that's before we even get into the story at all. So what they did is continue to iterate on what was my second favorite game of 2020 in a manner that is actually better than the battle systems were when I played them last year, and gives me a great deal of hope that they're going to continue down this path with the rest of the Final Fantasy VII Remake project. So I played it on normal. I played it through on normal. I played it through on hard. I went and got other achievements and things in a manner that is very much not me. I'm not a completionist to that level because I loved playing this so much. And I don't want to dive too deeply into the story other than to say that for that kind of 6-7 hour experience, it encapsulates a good story with good character arcs that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then sets off from there to meet up with where Final Fantasy VII Remake 2 is going to be whenever it deigns to be released, whatever decade of my life I might be in. And so I give it my highest recommendation. Intergrade on the whole is just a tremendously fulfilling project for somebody that loved what they did with Remake, bringing it up to 60 frames per second, being flashier on the next generation consoles, and then you affix this to it. It's one of my favorite experiences of the year. Intergrade wasn't eligible because Final Fantasy VII already won, and it's basically just a touch-up. But this was eligible, and I absolutely adored it, and just talking about it with you all makes me want to go fire it up again. So I don't think Tom has much to say here because he hasn't gotten through the original, and he would never deign to play the expansion DLC before the original game. But for anybody interested in this, Yuffie was never my favorite character in Final Fantasy VII, and they made her a much stronger character through this project. And if there's anything that this is for, it's for that kind of effect. So Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission, an expansion to Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, the Yuffie DLC to you and me, is my number 5 game experience of the year. Tom, what do you have to add to that?
Well, I think I was happy to hear the stuff you said about the battle system. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake's battle system is great. Like, I hope that Square just kind of carries it forward for all of their stuff.
It's fantastic.
It works really well. It's a lot of fun. It's flashy. So yes, you're right. I would not I don't play DLC or expansion content until I finish the core content, which means
Sure.
I miss a lot of it. So I haven't played it, can't comment on it. But Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is great.
See, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable place for you to live, even though you've missed out on one of my favorite experiences of the year so far. It'll still be there for you whenever you get to it. So I can accept that. What's your number 5?
It Takes Two.
It Takes Two to make a thing. Oh, I can't. Don't sing, Rick. You'll get freaking blasted.
It takes.
Yeah, there we go. Copyright strike. You're done, Rick. You're done. Okay, so we talked about it a little bit in my honorable mentions. What makes it work so well for you?
It is the most innovative co-op game I've played in generations, I think. Co-op gaming, especially couch co-op gaming, has been pretty weak, especially I've got it, I think almost as long as it's existed, in terms of, you know, you got basic co-op mechanics like, oh, here's this guy who you can only shoot from the back, so one player has to shoot him in the front and the other player has to shoot him in the back. Or like, I have buttons over here that affect your path and you have buttons over here that affect my path. It Takes Two has I didn't finish it, but played through a number of the acts. seems to have like a Mary Poppins bag of new, interesting cooperative mechanics to do. And requires you to work together a lot in terms of everything that you're doing. Oh, you need to put this here so I can connect to it, or do this, or you shoot it and I shoot it, and then the thing happens. I almost don't want to reveal too much of it. The only weakness I really have with It Takes Two is I could have like took the whole narrative of what I saw and just thrown it in the trash. I am not interested.
What do you mean by that?
I'm not interested in the overarching marriage, divorce, voodoo doll narrative thing. The book character is just primarily annoying. Some of the like stories that you get into with like the squirrels and stuff are just kind of goofy and fun. But the actual like overarching narrative, I could take it or leave it, to be honest. I could probably leave it. Like I think it probably distracts for me more than it adds.
Okay. Well, talk to me a
There
little
he
bit about
is.
this.
Wait, go back.
Okay. You don't
There he
like
is,
the Book of Love?
The Book of Love.
Yes, they do give him the accent. They definitely do that.
But the actual co-op, the way that they did the co-op gameplay, continually kind of coming up with new and interesting cooperative ability sets and things that really required you to coordinate and talk to each other, and the way that they handle the split screen in a way that, I mean, the game is built for split screen. Like even when you play it online, you are playing it split screen, and it is handling like those, you know, oh, you come into the same place and the split screen comes together and then you spread out to go somewhere in the split screen. Like it is probably the best co-op game I've played in maybe ever.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because this screenshot, right, is doing one of the things that I think is well handled in the game. So each character is given essentially a specific different skill in each world, right? And that's what really kind of foments the need for coordination, is that you can't do anything without the other person throughout all of this stuff. Now, it's not even a criticism exactly that I have of it, is it does, to me, feel like It Takes Two uses some of its best stuff earlier on, and maybe doesn't have the same amount of originality when you're kind of seeing not the same coordination, but a similar brain space for the coordination when you get the third power, the fourth power. Did that become a problem for you at all?
Not as far as I got. Hammer nail, I think, was interesting. Whatever you want to call this, goo gun, mash gun.
Yeah.
The like shrinking versus whatever the other one, like all of them I thought were interesting and used in interesting ways for as far as I got.
And I know you said you could take the story and cut it out. What do you feel about the banter and the bickering between the characters throughout the game?
Oh God, when we played it, we sort of we would basically like harp at each other like we were an angry married couple, because we thought that was funny, because they're just constantly like chewing each other out, and then occasionally having their hallmark moments where it's like, oh, maybe you're not so bad.
I seem to recall you sitting with me on a couch, and they had one of those hallmark moments, as you put it, and then like immediately after, they're back to like really sniping at each other.
Went back to bickering. I just that whole Yep, I think it'd be better without it. I think it's the story they wanted to tell, or like a theme they wanted to engage with that I don't think really is necessary. I think this could easily be, Honey, I Shrunk the Parents, and would be perfectly fine.
Well, I can't disagree with you there, and I do think it's at least something that you have to be careful of. Like I said, thematically, it's like I don't know whether it works for certain audiences, and they can kind of just skip it. But outside of that, which I think I found the bickering more funny than you did, I agree with you that it's very inventive, and it's one of those games from like the halcyon days of the PlayStation 2 where you don't know what you're going to be doing in 5 minutes from where you are. It'll be a fighting game. It'll be flying. It'll be racing.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be all these various different things 5 minutes later from whatever you were just recently doing. And the players themselves kind of mirror the bickering a little bit when they have to fly a plane together or things along those lines. So I think it's a great game. It just missed off on my list because it's not something that I personally lean towards. But it's definitely something that is special. So I think it's a great inclusion on your list.
So there's what do you call those? The big ones with the money? Super posts?
Oh, a super chat. Yeah, you can answer it.
So I haven't played a lot of co-op Portal 2 for what's worth, but I've played enough to, I think, comment on this, which is I'd say this is better. Co-op Portal 2, you both basically have the same ability. You have the same set of abilities, and you kind of tend to have an alpha gamer problem where someone is like, you go do that, and then the person goes and does that, and the other person like you've got one person sort of solving the puzzle and like pushing the other person around, and sometimes you both contribute in a way, but I feel like It Takes Two does a much better job of the co-op in that you each have different mechanics that you kind of only understand, like the other person's sort of seeing what you're doing, but like doesn't fully understand like how you're doing it or what you're doing it. So
I got a wooden wall here. Do whatever you do.
So you're communicating to each other about what you can do and what, like, sometimes you're not even in the same place and you're sort of describing what you're seeing. I think like I said, I think it's probably the best co-op I've played.
Yeah, and I love it too. I agree with you on the plot, and I think it's at least lightly uncomfortable in spots.
It's cringy. It's like cringy. I don't know if they intended it that way, but you're just like,
cringy. But you got weird things like the coma status. You got like the crying girl. It's all weird.
Yes.
in the overall narrative, and it's all surrounding some really fun, goofy stuff in the game. So I hear you. I hear you. You ready for my number 4?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Number 4, Metroid Dread. I love this game so much. We're fully in the games. Not that I don't love all these 10 games, but we're fully in the games that I just love to death.
I really got to get this.
I was gonna say, first of all, Tom, have you played this?
I haven't. I've heard great things.
Oh my God.
My Switch doesn't get a lot of action, to be perfectly honest.
Is that because it's taken by other people in the house, or?
No. I just like, there's so much to play.
There is so much to play. Well, Metroid Dread is a clean 10-hour kind of game. So you should find the time, because I think this might be, and this is going to sound like blasphemy to Tom, I think this might be my favorite Metroid. And I'm including in that Super Metroid.
I was going to say that's the blasphemy, right?
Yeah. I mean, Super Metroid's fantastic. And here's the thing, like I'm going to use screenshots here. We don't like to use video clips on this channel. I don't like to get anybody in trouble, including myself. But you look at this, and I don't think it's a looker in screenshot form. It can look a little industrial made, in my opinion. It's got, it doesn't really have a lot of organic angles in a lot of places and things like that. In action, in motion, with the fluidity of the game itself, it is very much a looker. And more than that, it is just a fantastic Metroidvania of the kind that gave Metroidvania the name itself. That this is terribly well designed and terribly well thought about in terms of how they put these pieces together. And in terms of a narrative, which is not usually what I give credit to Metroid for, it's actually got a story. It's actually kind of the end of things for the main Metroid concepts in the series. And that you can take or leave that to your heart's content. As a game, it stands head and shoulders above most Metroidvanias, outside of some really special indies. I know there's Ori. I know there is Hollow Knight. I know there are these other games. This is, to me, exactly where I live. Unlike those kinds of games, this is your Alien, your old school 80s science fiction that Metroid was originally kind of concepted around, at least by the time you get to Super Metroid. And they hit the nail on the head. Now, I have to tell you, I have a weak spot for Mercury Steam. I liked their Lords of Shadows stuff. I love this. People ask me all the time, who should Microsoft buy? Who should Sony buy? Mercury Steam would be very high on my list if they could wrest it away from. I think they're owned by a financial outlet right now. But it is so good. And if you don't know anything about this game, Tom, I pulled up a screenshot of the Emmys. These are essentially unkillable robots that you have to kind of sneak around to get to various parts of the levels until you get enough power to blow them away. All of that is kind of new to Metroid. Very interesting to me. It doesn't scare me. You know, a lot of reviewers are like scariest stuff ever. It's not scary, but it is an intense new way to play these levels. And I can't speak highly enough about it. I can't speak highly enough about the organic nature of how the maps connect. I do think it's pretty difficult to read the map that they've provided in the game, especially when you're trying to figure out where forward is. If you get yourself lost, it can be difficult to figure out how to get back on track because it is a kind of complicated nesting of overlapping pathways that aren't clearly not connected until you realize what they are. So that you can be in the same area and not be able to connect to a hallway that's right next to you because it's just not the way the pathways work. But you learn the areas, you learn how to deal with these things. You're constantly getting upgrades and power-ups just the way you want. You've got that spirit of loneliness, of science fiction, of going through and dealing with Metroids and space pirates and everything else in a fashion that I haven't been able to exactly mirror since Super Metroid. And I just can't speak highly enough of this game. So it's a shame you haven't played it because then we could just gush on stream for a solid 20 minutes from here. But I love Metroidvanias. I really have for a long time. This goes right with Symphony of the Night to me as one of the best ever made.
But does it feature an ending sequence that you will remember for the rest of your life?
Ending's pretty good, man.
All right, fair enough. That was a reference to Super Metroid.
Yes, I caught that. But for our viewers, yes, the Metroid sequence with the baby Metroids, Tom has talked about before.
Yeah, stuck with me.
Yeah. So no, Metroid Dread. We unfortunately can't have a debate about this one because Tom hasn't played it, but I hope he gets to play it very soon. I was blown away by a game that I wasn't actually that excited for. That these screenshots, seeing it at E3, I was not convinced by.
Yeah, I think that's where I am actually. Like I wasn't excited for it. And I never got to the point of being like, I should play that. But a lot of people had spoken very highly of it.
It's incredible. It's an incredible game. And I wasn't expecting that when I saw it originally presented. So I don't think I can necessarily change your mind with these screenshots or just talking about it, except to say that it may be my favorite Metroid ever made. So there it is. Number 4 on my list. I absolutely loved it. The question here is the story is good. The story is good. It's minimal. It's still a Metroid story, but it is in fact a story. So I enjoyed it. So definitely check it out if you're at all interested in it. All right. So that's my number 4. I think we got your number 4, right? It's Chorus.
Yeah, it was Chorus. So I don't know if we do your number 3.
Yeah, now? I think we double up on mine. So my number 3 after Metroid Dread. I already saw some people reference this one in the chat. They're gonna make fun of me, but I love this game to death. I think Tom might know this one. It's the Forgotten City. So the Forgotten City. Let's talk about things that look mildly lame. Okay. This box art, this enticement to get into the Forgotten City, I entirely understand people ignoring. Okay. I understand looking at that and saying that looks like a weird 2000s game that's one of those click myth adventure or mist adventure kind of wannabes, and I am not interested in that kind of game. I like
totally random full motion video from like the 3DO.
Okay. See, now I want to buy it that way. So you're not convincing to me. But the Forgotten City is, and I say this with no irony and no joking intended, is the best time looping game of the year. And this was a year that had some time loops in it. The Forgotten City is, at its heart, an adventure game, very limited combat. Some of the best dialogue and best conversation navigating that I've seen in video games this year or really in the prior years. And it is a game that I don't want to spoil for you. So what I will say is it has more twists and turns than the average suspense thriller. and it has things that will come to you organically in your head shortly before they're revealed to you in a fashion that is by far the best way to have those twists and turns, by far the best way to experience them. Everything is earned. Every little bit of this story, every ending is compelling, is narratively compact. You can understand it, and is meaningful to what you've done in that game. And the time loops work great. What you're gaining is information and experience that you can use in the next one in a fashion that is everything 12 minutes wants to be and is not. And I say this as someone that played the Forgotten City in 12 minutes in rapid succession, almost at exactly the same time. And the Forgotten City is so much better, it's almost unfathomable. At its base, this game is about finding an underground Roman city that you are teleported to back in time and interacting with its people as they deal with the draconian legal system and what justice means in concept and what that means in connection with religion and philosophy, all while dealing with a supernatural state of affairs that you don't understand when you get there and you'll understand completely when you leave. It's not a ridiculously long game, but it's not short either. And it doesn't require Twitch skills for the most part. So if that's something that's a barrier to you, I know it's a barrier to folks like my parents. You don't need Twitch skills for this. It's primarily conversations and slowly gaining understanding in the way that the best adventure games of old used to do. This is one of the best written games of the year. I'd say it's probably the second best written game of the year. And I can't recommend it more to anybody. It's fantastically done. I had a wonderful experience with it. I wasn't expecting it at all. I bought it on a lark. And it is one of the best games of the year. And I think I saw some people referencing folks going gaga or over the moon about the Forgotten City. I'm one of those people. The Forgotten City had a real shot at being my number one game of the year. All three of these in my top 3 slots had a real shot at being my number one game of the year. And I love it to death. Tom, you can't get out of this one. I know you watched big chunks of the Forgotten City. I know it's not really your thing. Tell me one good thing and one bad thing about this game.
So yeah, I didn't play it. But this was when I was spending a lot of time with you, and so I watched a lot of it. I mean, so obviously I think that the bad thing or the weakness is kind of right on all the screenshots and everything we're talking. It's like maybe single A, in terms of its quality of both visuals, and I think, I guess it's visuals. It's not, I think the actual voice acting is fine, but the character models are terrible. So
they're a little bit older.
Yeah, it's like someone
said, terrible. It's not displeasing to the eye.
I have a pretty good idea of a time loop story I want to tell, but all I have access to is Morrowind.
I think this was a Skyrim mod originally, actually. Yeah. I think the Forgotten City's history is a Skyrim mod.
That makes sense. The good thing I can say is, yeah, it does seem to tell a really interesting story where you're getting a lot of knowledge. You're constantly going through time loops. And unlike 12 minutes, it manages the time loops so that you're not constantly redoing the same thing.
Very important.
Like, I've resolved this. It's basically like if you saw Live, Die, Repeat or basically or Groundhog Day, but you had to watch everything that he does every day.
That's 12 minutes, not the Forgotten City.
Is how 12 minutes work. Is how 12 minutes works. Forgotten City lets you say, all right, I've handled branch A. So that's done, and we're either going to sort of say that I'm doing it, or I think another character actually kind of does some of the stuff for you.
They've thought about how that should look and how it would make sense. So that the parts where it would be a montage, they managed to do that live while you play.
So that's what I could say. Yeah, it's not my thing. It's a very dialogue heavy.
It's a dialogue game.
Sandbox puzzle. Games, for whatever reason, and this is going to be nothing to anyone except maybe you, is it constantly was reminding me of like Sentient.
Oh, sure.
Where you're kind of like interacting with people and trying to understand what's going on and like push them into situations. Now, Sentient is weird in that it can go like 9 different directions based on like what you do and how you do, and it's very timing related. Whereas this has more like a specific story it wants to tell. that you're kind of uncovering your way through. But it was the same kind of like, run over here and talk to this guy. Oh, and then this thing's going to be happening. So I got to go here and talk to this guy or put this thing in the thing.
No, it's not. Chat, you're asking if it's Disco Elysium. No, I love Disco Elysium, by the way. But I know that kind of up its own, whatever you want to call it, is not always for everybody. This is not that. It's straightforward. It just uses a lot of dialogue. It's actually really excellent. The writing is way above where video games are at a general level. And someone else has said, this was made by a lawyer who quit his job to go full-time programmer, right? I didn't. It doesn't really surprise me. It seems like a lot of stuff I love are people that's looked at lawyer as a career and said, oh, God help me on that. So like, I got board games from Resurrection Games, and that's a lawyer that said, I'd rather make board games. If this guy's a lawyer that would rather make The Forgotten City, that checks out. I get all that.
For what it's worth, I feel like you kind of did know that. Didn't you actually talk to the guy who made it at one point when you were like,
I think I sent an email.
Singing its praises on Twitter or whatever, that the guy started talking to you?
Yeah, The Forgotten City. Yeah, they did have a response. I forgot about that. Thank you. I don't know if I knew the history. It doesn't ring a bell, but it's been a long year. It's pandemic time. Who knows? But thank you for bringing it up again. It's definitely the case that a bunch of lawyers get out of law school, go into a law career, and say, "Whoa, that's uncool." So it doesn't surprise me at all. I love this game. Tom rightly points out the visuals are not all that, but I do think it is more than visually satisfying enough to play through. You're not going to be heaven forfending and fainting on the couch or anything from how it looks. He also brought up a game called Sentient, which you should look up the screenshots for if you want to see some visuals.
Well, it's like PS2, right?
I think it was 1, man.
Oh, God.
But those concepts of people on a schedule, I mean, this is a time loop. It's also over the course of a day. And so people are moving around, and you get to know where they are, and you get to know when they congregate and know what that means for what you want to accomplish in a way that is predictable, but still somewhat organic. And the secrets come out. It's such a nice clip that it has tremendous pacing, even though it's an open world. So Forgotten City, can't recommend it enough for anybody that's interested in storytelling and what games can do as a medium as storytellers, because the Forgotten City is the kind of thing that I love to see. Should have won Best Indie Debut Game to me at Game Awards. Not that I hold them in, sacrosanct or anything like that. But Forgotten City, I love it to death. So Tom, what's your number 3, buddy?
Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart.
Oh, you weren't joking. I went high up there. All right. So talk to me about Ratchet.
Okay, so I love Ratchet and Clank to death, just in general as a gamer.
You got to give your tilt on this, Mr. Designer.
It is the first game series that I worked on when I joined the industry. I worked for Insomniac on Ratchet and Clank: A Crack in Time. I was excited to go work on that because I love the series. The only thing I could say that I would complain about Rift Apart is it doesn't depart enough from kind of the formula of Ratchet and Clank. It's doing a lot of very similar. Actually, it has a lot in common with A Crack in Time, in that you've got, Clank over here doing some like weird puzzles. But it's gorgeous. It's fun. It's goofy. I loved it. I just loved every minute of it. I loved playing it. I thought it did some really fun stuff with certain planets. I have like almost nothing bad to say about it. Like when you jack it up to super hard difficulty, it's actually pretty challenging, sometimes unfairly. Yeah, in terms of I don't know even what to call it, like a mascot game. Like this is one of my absolute favorites.
It's kind of a mascot game.
And yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's like walking through a Pixar movie.
It is.
So I can't recommend it highly enough. Like I said, I think from a narrative perspective, yep, it's like it's not doing a whole lot new. It's not taking us into dramatic directions, as Rick said.
I would argue it's very simple. It's very kiddie. It's more kiddie than I expected.
That's fair. That's fair. I think that's true. But I'm okay with that.
Sure.
Sometimes I don't want like the mature, like discussion of the horrors of humanity or whatever. I just want to be a cool
I was just
little
looking for
space
like
fox.
I was just looking for like Disney XD instead of like Mickey's Playhouse. That's all.
I'd have to, I don't know. I'd have to look at it. But like, I don't have, so it's actually funny because my first two, we're going to talk more about narrative because I think their narrative strengths are what pushed them to being the top two on my list. This is just a fun, great game that looks great, plays great, and I was like enthralled with it, and even went back and started replaying it, which is not something that I do.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. It does look great and it does play great. And that's arguably the most important stuff when you're talking about these kinds of things. And it has an all-timer level, and we're trying not to spoil here, but I will agree with that. One of its planets I felt was an all-timer and deserved at the highest levels of Ratchet and Clank. It clearly is inspired by Crack in Time, which Tom has a special relationship with since he worked on it directly. And it's trying to recapture what Crack in Time was doing in a way that I think is a little bit less than Crack in Time succeeded in doing. So just as a story kind of telling thing, I think it feels like a shadow of a Crack in Time in some important ways. And they bring in a new character, the female Lombax, and is essentially just Ratchet. There's no play style difference. There's not even an arsenal difference. It just kind of transitions over. And I thought that was a missed opportunity to have somebody really react differently. Instead, they were using it as a story beat about how she reacts to certain things versus how Ratchet does. And it's just very simplistic, which is fine. I think Tom's right, and I can be a little bit too hard on this kind of stuff because it's undoubtedly going to work great for 9 to 12-year-olds. I just would have been interested in seeing something a little bit more serious. I think Crack in Time actually is that. So Rift Apart feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity, a little bit of a copying of what came before, but it is undoubtedly gorgeous. It is a showstopper for the PlayStation 5. And it really does play well. I think it plays mostly like every Ratchet and Clank in the kind of the modern era, but it plays well, and it's a fun game.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things they do well, I think, is, and we talked about this, is like there is some like traversal and like hover booting and stuff around the arenas that does feel a little bit more dynamic and good. They've got the like wall run and stuff, so that you're doing more movement in addition to just like target prioritization.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think some of the stuff with Dr. Nefarious and some of the alternate versions of characters that you would have known for 20 years are cool. So I like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It was on my honorable mentions. It's obviously not in my top 3 of the year. But I think it's a worthy inclusion. I just disagree, but reasonable minds can differ, we say around here, right?
Well, for fun, like now that we're done with my number 3, the chat's talking a bunch about Control. You can tell them what you think about that.
Why are you trying to get me in trouble? Why is Control being referenced at all?
I don't know. Someone was playing it, and now everyone's talking about how great it is.
How'd you like Control? I'm interested in hearing opinions about Remedy's game. I actually did a post-mortem on Control. I love Remedy games. Alan Wake is one of my top 5 games of all time. I do not like Control. Control has, some of the best combat Remedy's put together in a story that I felt was really, really lacking, especially coming off of Quantum Break and Alan Wake. So you can see that in my, I think, 45-minute video on the postmortem of that game. But that's where I wind up on that, unfortunately. But that's a nice sojourn into Control land. I think it's time for my number 2. So let's talk about Returnal.
It's funny. So I know exactly what's going to happen with our last 2.
We're gonna reverse them.
We are.
All right, so let's talk about them together then. Okay, so mine is number 2 on Returnal. This will be Tom's number 1. And then I'm very happy to hear actually that your number 2 is as great as it is. So we'll just do this as
either that or you're gonna go completely off base, and I'm like, oh, never mind.
I mean, I hope that this
I'm pretty
matches
sure
up.
I'm pretty sure I know you're number one.
I'm pretty sure we could talk about this. But yeah, let's just do mine then and know that these are reversed because I want to talk about these in turn. And this is Tom's number one game of the year. So maybe what I'll do is I'll let you talk about it first. Talk to me about Returnal.
Returnal was a
Your game of the year.
Yeah, game of the year. Fabulous game. Could not stop playing it. Housemark, best thing ever to date.
Very true.
It was one of those games like I couldn't stop playing. I was super into. Rick and I were having phone calls. We were debating what is the narrative trying to get to? What are they talking about here? Did you find this thing? What does that mean? Its gameplay is super compelling. It's gorgeous, super fun. When you actually get into it and you're like good at it and you're in the flow state, you're like a friggin' ninja. Like it's phenomenal.
Friggin' ninja should go on the box.
And probably the most unfortunate part of okay, sorry, we'll bring this up later. The most unfortunate part of the gameplay, which is fantastic, is once you fall out of it, you have to like work your way back up. Like you can't just jump back into this game.
That's true. I would probably own me right now. And I could get 3 levels deep with my pistol. Like I was enjoying Returnal so much. The gameplay, the dodging between things, bullet hell as realized in a third-person shooter, that I was seeing how far I could get with just the starter pistol. Because there's no reason that you can't get as far as you want because everything is patterned and everything is telegraphed. It's just telegraphed where you have a third of a second to react to it. And once you get up to those kinds of levels, and mastery isn't usually my thing, but it was with Returnal, you're having a blast. I could run through the entire first biome with just a pistol against the challenge rooms, against the boss, and I did it because it was fun. And now if I did that right this second, I'd probably lose in the first room.
Yeah, you've definitely fall off. I actually downloaded it to review for this, and it didn't download fast enough. So I'll try some today, and I'll give you my thoughts. Yeah. Also, it's a as you said, it's a time loop. It's a time loop that works. It's a time loop that works and tells a good narrative. Mostly. The time loop is built so it's a roguelite that takes its sort of repeating and builds that into the story. I love when a game does that. Like Everspace did that, I think, in a really cool way.
Clones in that game, right? Yeah.
Spoiler.
It's the first thing you okay.
I don't think you figure that out until you're like in the middle. Anyway. But it does that. The narrative, I think Rick and I debated a lot. I think it's a little too open-ended is my biggest complaint.
Okay, let's talk about this because this is the biggest blemish. This is actually what I thought was going to drive it off in number one of your list. I'm not going to lie.
Actually, there's two. I have 2 things, but yes, we can talk about it.
So this game tries to be artistically weird in almost a kind of Twin Peaksy way. You're seeing things that don't make sense. There's an ever-present astronaut that doesn't really make sense. And I don't mean like she looks. I don't mean like Celine, but an astronaut from like 1960s in the Apollo program that appears in random places and things like that. And by the time you get to the end of this game, you'll have some notions. And we're not going to spoil anything here. This isn't a spoiler cast. But I think I had this conversation with Tom a lot that there's kind of a post-game kind of thing that you can do to get a little bit more of the ending. That the hope had been that, yes, you can be ambiguous and weird, but when you get to the special ending, it should be a little bit clearer what happened. And unfortunately, it just dives straight into let's be weirder. And I thought when conversing with Tom on this earlier in the year that he was really upset about them just going with ambiguous. Who knows? That's a lot of weird stuff. And that it would bother him more than it apparently did.
Yeah, so I think the thing is that narrative is not my strongest like consideration, and I think by and large this pulled me through a lot in terms of narrative. Like, oh, what does that mean, or what is this thing trying to tell me, or like, oh, that was a weird thing that happened over there, and like more and more things even about the gameplay or the game, like the music that it chooses to play or things about the environment are actually telling you things about the story. Also, it should be said that like it does a great job with haptics. It uses the adaptive triggers for like mechanic. Like it's like the next geniest next get gen game. And I couldn't. I don't think I could love it more. Yes,
That narrative could be tightened up for you. I know that.
That's true. That's true. Everything's capable of being. I think the narrative. I think they needed to settle on a direction and tell me what it was. I think there are a couple good directions they can take. They did not take any of them specifically. That's my sort of biggest problem. And then my secondary problem is as a roguelite, and I don't complain about this too much because I got plenty of time out of it, really enjoyed it. The runs are not unique enough, in my opinion. Like you're seeing 90% of the items and content and stuff every run, as opposed to when you do like a Binding of Isaac or a Risk of Rain, where you may see stuff like you just may have completely different, wildly different builds from game to game. That's not what you're going to see here. You're going to have some favorite weapons that you can usually get. Each of those weapons is going to have favorite upgrades that you can kind of usually find. So in that regard, I think it misses a little bit of what make roguelites exciting, and especially has no real end game, in my opinion. Like once you finish the content, there's like you can play for arcade scores and stuff, and maybe there's people that like that really speaks to, especially in sort of the bullet hell sort
the
of
daily challenges, you know.
Market, but not me. I got to the end, was very happy with my time, haven't really gone back.
Yeah, I haven't either, because that's just kind of the way we roll around with games. But Returnal was very special to me as well. I do think we should point out that one of the things that I heard a lot online was that it was too hard. I mean, you know, talking about accessibility, I was in question time, and that was a question raised to me this morning, that there were journalists and players and others that essentially said, I have to put it down. I can't progress. And that surprised me a little bit, because I do think that Returnal is a tremendously fair game, that it telegraphs everything. You do have to keep kind of awareness up, and it can require a lot of you in terms of reactions. You really are shooting and dodging and diving and jumping and shooting in a fashion that does make you feel, what was the term you used? Freaking ninja?
Freaking ninja.
Okay. That you get that level of mastery, and that works for you. But in terms of people getting locked out, I do think there are a couple of places in the game where biome 2, biome 5, people just seem to be dying and not able to kind of make it through in a way that I felt bad for. Do you think it's too hard in any places, or that there should be difficulty levels?
So sorry, I feel like I got like a note passed across the desk, like I'm in a news broadcast.
Okay, what's breaking?
Adriana just wanted me to know what she thinks is your game of the year. She is almost certainly correct. I can't say for certain.
Thank you, bud.
But yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it is too hard at times in a way that could be like you have to. This is almost so. Here's the thing. By and large, in Returnal, you don't get stronger from run to run. There's a few things that you do get better at. You unlock these weapon upgrades that make the weapons better. But that's it.
It's very light.
It's very light progression from thing to thing. So like, even if you're a person who's like, oh, Dark Souls is too hard, I don't really like it. You can kind of grind Dark Souls out if you really have to. Like you can push your stats.
It'll take you a while.
Yeah. You still have to be decent, but there's a progression that you can do. Returnal doesn't have that. If you're not good at the game that Returnal is, and you can't get better at it, yeah, you're stuck.
It's twitchy.
And yeah, it requires quick reaction. It requires like crazy situational awareness. Some of the rules that you need to learn, they don't ever like spell out really, which is like, oh, I can't dash through those balls, and these ones I can shoot. Like you just kind of learn by doing. But yeah, so like I said, it's phenomenal. Like the narrative kept me hooked right until it sort of fell off for me. So I I can only
It's intriguing the whole way. Yeah.
I can only complain about that so much.
Yep.
It's challenging, so there's that. Definitely, like, it was a rogue, one of the real hard things with roguelikes is to get that balance of kind of like beating you back, but letting you still kind of progress. Like, it's a very narrow window that you're trying to hit for a lot of people, which is, I think, why you have this, issue with some people saying it's too hard, where it's like, I want you to basically lose repeatedly. Part of the storyline doesn't work if you play Returnal end to end without dying.
Probably true.
And I don't think there's anyone who's doing that, but it's so, it's like, I want you to die and I want you to progress, like be moving forward each time you do a run. And obviously sometimes that's not going to happen. But I think Returnal, at least for me, I was in their window.
Yeah, and we could get through it, right? Like, I can't play all the Twitch games, and I'm in my 40s, and I could do it as well. It was a bit of a surprise to me because usually I think of that for things that are unfair, and I feel like Dark Souls sometimes is a little bit unfair. Sekiro is a little bit unfair. I think Returnal's very, very fair in what it asks you to do, but it's also worth noting that you get into this game and you look at it and you think you're playing a third-person shooter, and in a very real way, you're not. You're playing a Housemarque game that happens to be from a third-person shooter kind of perspective, that you are playing Super Stardust or whatever else, just in a different way. And that can take some getting used to. I remember feeling weird about playing the game for maybe the first hour until you're like, okay, I got this. I'm holding this button down and I'm focusing on dodging and that kind of thing, rather than trying to precision strike Call of Duty style or something like that.
This is not precise aiming. This is like throwing bullets in the general direction of the bad guys and trying very hard not to get hit.
Like you're playing R-Type. Your focus goes to those bullets coming in. Yeah.
Like Rick was saying, now I lost what Rick was saying. Shoot.
Sure. People do that. That's fine.
What I was going to say, first of all, I'll just go off on a tangent and maybe I'll think of what I was going to say. I've loved Housemarque a lot. Loved a lot of what they've made. This was kind of a big departure, a big move for them, and I think they knocked it out of the park. And I'm excited to see what they do next, because I think this was amazing.
This was their proof of concept. They're going to get the Sony money now.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens from here, but they proved it, definitely. I love this game. Obviously, it's my number 2 to your number 1. It was my number 1 for the better part of the year. Like, it was easy. Like, Returnal was sitting there for forever until it wasn't, surprise usurpation of the number 1 slot. But I think it is fantastic. I think it is easily the action game of the year, if not the decade. And the narrative doesn't bother me that much, except that it seems very clear that there isn't a specific answer that you can easily attach to the damn thing. And I feel like that's cheating a little bit.
Right. They didn't even like we went over this in our head a couple times. Like Rick and I talked about this, which is why it rates so highly on my list, is that doesn't happen. Like, there's only a few things like in Inception and stuff that make us have this conversation.
We had like an hour-long phone call.
What does that mean? Yeah. And I guess the problem that I have with Returnal is it doesn't feel like the pieces can all fit with a single answer. Like, I think if we try different theories, you're like, oh yeah, but this part doesn't work then, or this part doesn't work. Like, all the puzzle pieces are there, but they can't. There's no solution to fit them all together that I can find. Like, maybe the developers can say, oh no, this is it.
Yeah.
But Gecko was bringing up, he had a super chat a while ago that we should.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Best walking sim of all time.
Outer Wilds.
That's fair. I was gonna go with The Witness.
Witness is a puzzle game.
So is the Outer Wilds.
Yeah.
You want to do this?
Yeah, I can. I mean, Witness is straight up 6,000 puzzles. Outer Wilds, every single thing that you need to do in Outer Wilds is explained to you in a text message. You just have to find it.
Yeah.
So I'll take that to the grave. But Outer Wilds, I couldn't recommend more either. That was number 10 maybe on my 2019 list. Very, very good game. But that's my answer for best walking simulator. I could think about it more for a more specific walking simulator kind of approach, but definitely that. I know some people want to attach that to Death Stranding. My game of the year from, what is that? I think 2019. So Death Stranding is so much more than a walking simulator. Don't even get me started. But it is utterly fantastic. One of my favorite games ever made, both in terms of what it is as a play session and its commentary on the human condition. So, I can start sounding like an art critic if I go too far into Death Stranding land. I think Returnal is fantastic, and I'm so glad to see it as your game of the year. I'm a little surprised because of the conversations we had earlier, but I think it is more than deserving of that position. Now, I think we can play the guessing game here, but I also think what my game of the year is, and that's obviously Microsoft Flight Simulator.
You did play a lot of that.
I'm surprised to find that as number 2 on your list, but in actuality, it's probably this game, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
I like that when you put that up. I'm like, wait, what's Guardians? Is that a thing?
I just really love Destiny 2. Yes, for those of you that were interested, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite game of the year. And what do we got here? What's the prediction? Prediction, Rick, GOTG, nailed it. It is definitely Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. It is the best. Let's see if we can get this up here. Oh, look, fantastic. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy was not a game I was looking forward to. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm going to stop using the whole name just in a second here, is a game that I thought, frankly, when it was presented originally, looked a little desperate, looked like a response to the fact that the Avengers from Crystal Dynamics under Square Enix was not doing well. And the presentation was largely in response to the Avengers reception, in my opinion. It was, this is single player. You're not going to control everybody else. They were very focused on establishing that they were not the Avengers. They were not making the mistakes, whatever they may be, in your mind or mine, about the Avengers project that they had entered into. So Guardians looked interesting. I'm not the biggest Guardians of the Galaxy fan. I don't love the James Gunn movies as much as everybody else. My wife adores Guardians of the Galaxy 1. I like Guardians of the Galaxy 1. I could kick Guardians of the Galaxy 2 off the nearest pier. I don't like that movie much at all. And so I looked at this and said, it's not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, folks. That's already a problem. It's different voice actors. It's different faces. And I don't know that I love how weird this looks. I remember seeing early screenshots of this game and being like, this all looks odd. All of these kinds of interactions, all of these kinds of people look weird. And I got it because they said it's a narrative-based game. It's a single-player only game. It's not going to have microtransactions. This is the kind of EA pitch when they got rid of loot boxes. And I said, I want to support that. I want to support story-based games. I want to support this kind of stuff. I love action adventures, and we don't get enough of them. I want Square Enix to make money off of me on this project. And as I played it, it slowly became the best story of the year, the best game that I played of the year, and obviously my number one experience. And much like some of the stuff that we've talked about in this space, I don't want to go over narrative spoilers too much. But one thing that I will say here is that this story, Guardians of the Galaxy, is much, much bigger and much more interested in examining pathos and examining character, examining what it means to lose people, what grief looks like, what loss, what motivates folks to follow people, than it appears on initial inspection. That this game presents as a comedy where everything's zany and it's all just everybody having fun. And it is very much not that. There are tons of jokes. This game has banter that does not stop. I have no idea how long the script is for this, but if you think of an Uncharted game and you think of the interactions that you have between Nate and Sully when they're together in the jungle and you have those little conversations, and you imagine that never stopping for multiple people across different conversation lines for 16, 17, 20-hour video game experience, then that's what you get with Guardians of the Galaxy. And I say it's 20 hours long. It really is. it felt like something that I thought they'd put enough resources in that I thought there was an ending at 6 hours. I thought there was an ending at 10. I thought there was an ending at 13. It just keeps going and building on itself and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, more impactful, more interesting. And by the time you get to the ending is so earned and so fantastic. You feel like you've watched a season of your favorite television show and you're going to miss the characters that are in it at the end. And then you're going to go back and you're going to look at the MCU Guardians of the Galaxy and say, those guys feel a little bit fake and phony, don't they? They don't feel like the real Guardians, because the real Guardians live in this video game with fantastic performances from virtually everyone, with interesting character arcs from everyone at the same point in time. And a plot line that really does want to talk about more than just zany people having space adventures. And that's what I'm going to leave you with on that, except to point out, we talked about it in Chorus. We talked about cults in space. We talked about magic and mystery. Guardians of the Galaxy is everything that's in Chorus times 10 in terms of narrative, handled with more subtlety and aplomb. And it won Best Narrative of the Year at Game of the Year Awards. And it was never even in doubt to me. It wasn't even close to anything that came out this year. Not a JRPG, not anything else from an adventure game standpoint. Guardians of the Galaxy tells a story that I immediately wanted to jump back into. And I wasn't expecting that at all, period. So the tilt here from me was it'll be a middling experience. That's great. And it turned into one of my favorite stories ever in video games. Now, to talk about the cons before I let Tom talk ever again, I do want to say that the battling, which is you'll be doing a lot of, is, I would say, slightly above functional. It is simplistic. As you can see from Tom's very elaborate critical hand motion, it is this. It is very simple. It is perfunctory. It is designed to get you from point A to point B, because what they want to do is they want to talk about these characters. They want to tell you this story because that's what they're best at, and they know it. And when I look at a game like this, when I look at a movie or book or whatever, and they say, we understand our strengths, and it's telling this story we've decided to tell with these characters the way we've decided to tell it. We're going to make the battling fun. It's never not fun, but we're going to get you going. It reminds me so much of The Witcher 3, where people complain about that combat all the time. And what The Witcher 3 combat does is it makes you feel like a Witcher. It lets you get potions and you swing your sword a little bit, and then you're on to the next plot point, because that's what they do. Guardians of the Galaxy is like that. It's the best Uncharted game ever made. It's the best Marvel game, at least since Spider-Man. And you would have to really, really torture me to figure out whether Spider-Man 2018 or Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is better. I would probably wind up with Guardians, because Spider-Man's less interested in talking about the big things that Guardians of the Galaxy is. And you add on to that my favorite musical score of the year, not just with the 80s soundtrack, which is phenomenal, but the actual movie score that, in my opinion, is movie caliber throughout and evokes emotions. And I will tell you this, I think I tweeted this out, but Guardians of the Galaxy made me feel things. And I'm a corporate lawyer. And do you have any idea what that takes? That's why it's my number one game of the year, easily. Now, Tom, you've played some of this. What do you think?
You got a super chat I want to hit.
Oh, sure, Gecko. Gecko, you're hitting me with so many super chats. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. Do you have an elevator pitch for this game for someone who hasn't seen any Marvel movie? Well, I just did it. I mean, granted, we had to get to about like floor 74 to kind of give me the
very
time
tall building
to make that pitch.
Slow elevator.
But in all honesty, the pitch is this. It is an action adventure where you're going to love the characters. It's going to tell you a great story that's going to have suspense, humor, pathos, human emotion, and you're going to feel good for having experienced it when it's over. That's the elevator pitch. It is fantastic, and it is easily my number one game of the year. Tom.
Best narrative guaranteed of the year, maybe of several years. I mean, it's telling a great story. I can tell that. It's has a bunch of sort of like telltale X will remember that, or some character was happy about how you handled something. I literally have no idea how much effect that has on actually how things play out. Could be nothing, could be everything.
BioWare style.
Sometimes they refer back to things that happened, which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. My wife is watching this in the other room, and we're on a slight delay, and now it's distracting me.
Okay. Stay with me, bud. We're almost at the end.
No, I just have to maybe have to turn up my thing so I don't hear. It's a fantastic narrative. So I agree with Rick that when this was first like announced,
I didn't
or
care.
shown, I was like, that looks like garbage. That looks like it looks janky and clunky, and I just don't want to play it. And in my defense, I'm fairly certain it is kind of janky and clunky.
Yeah, let me speak to that for just a second, because I agree. If you take an Uncharted game, or you take something Sony first party, which is like where the polish lives, they get a lot of credit for this. And you imagine that game about 6 months before release, in terms of polish passes. That's where I feel Guardians actually lives in terms of its performance. There are little things, textures coming in the middle of a cutscene, getting caught, your knee getting caught on the edge of a climb that you have to make. Little things that with another 6 months of polish passes would have gone away. And I wish they did that, because this is the gem that Square Enix has been looking for forever. But it doesn't matter ultimately to the end state of the game. Now I'll let you continue, Tom.
I hit some more serious bugs and issues than Rick. I reloaded a game and certain progress had been lost. Items were missing from my inventory. Things like that. Managed to push past it. Not the hugest thing in the world. But I guess the core for me is it seems like a really cool narrative that I really like being a part of. The combat, the gameplay is passable. It's like when you get into a fight, you're just kind of like throwing bullets and abilities at things with not a whole lot of thought. There are like there's like a stagger system where you're trying to stagger some of the heavier guys, and then you basically have your abilities go in two buckets of, well, 3 buckets, I guess, of stagger, control, and damage, and you're just kind of like mixing those up. The fights are kind of they're spectacular a lot of the time, which is cool. Like you see a lot of abilities going around, and Gamora's like flying over here and knifing that guy while Rocket's pulling out all these guns, and so it's very thematic and cool. The core gameplay is kind of I'm just trying to get to the next moment of the story. I'm not super compelled by.
Now I know you're pushing back on me on some of this stuff, and I think that's great. Just to confirm a couple of things. One, this is your number 2, right?
Yes, this is my number 2.
Okay, just to be clear, because we said we reversed those two.
Yes, this is my number 2.
This is your 2. I do think the shooty is pedestrian, but I do think one thing that's lost in just your coverage of that, and I didn't mention it when I was talking about why this game's so awesome, is that in the action sequences, they've taken what I would consider to be a kind of modern BioWare Dragon Age Inquisition kind of approach to how battle actually works. So it is about you shooting things, but not just that. You've got essentially all of the Guardians on one part of your D-pad, and you are telling them what to do and keeping track of what they're doing and what they would be best at and how you can combo them in a way that is very much action, modern Western RPG. And that follows through with the way that the actual banter works, that you actually do on many, 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 many occasions, get the party fighting about something and you pick left or right and you can settle it, or you can let the timer go and they can just be silent in a fashion that's taking in all of this Mass Effect and Dragon Age stuff and building it into an Uncharted game in a way that I think just saying it's pedestrian action doesn't quite give it enough credit for the RPG-ness that you get from being Star-Lord in those kind of capacities.
On the one hand, I agree with you. I think it feels very much like an RPG in terms of like your shooting is you auto aim at guys and you're just kind of like throwing bullets at them until they die. Really, the throwing the abilities is the important part. And then you've got like an elemental gun thing that you're using to solve puzzles with the enemies, kind of where it's like basically it's a hard counter. Like this guy can only be hurt by this element. So you have to do that before your team can really do anything about it.
And is also built into the lore and story. Like everything in this game is fed back through the story. Like that was clearly their centerpiece.
But I would say like, I don't know, like we brought up Mass Effect. Mass Effect has better gameplay than this. Like just, I can say that I think without.
Did you just say the first Mass Effect has better gameplay than this?
Actually, I was specifically going with the series. So, but yes, I'll say the first one.
Okay, you're wrong. But that's why we have debate up in the big thumbnail.
The shooting is better. There's more interesting ability
in Mass
usage.
Effect. This is the hill you want to die on?
Rick, there's no aiming in this. You just say, shoot that guy and hold the trigger down until it eventually runs out. And then you active reload and do it again. There's no interesting combat there at all. You're just running
because
in a
that's
circle.
the not interesting part. You're otherwise managing where you're standing on the field of play, and you're otherwise managing all your other characters, which you're not really doing in Mass Effect 1 so much. And okay, you know what? You've gone too far. Mass Effect 1's gameplay is terrible.
And
this
then
average.
You're just basically pulling up your ability wheel and being like, you do this, you do this, you do this. Now wait for the cooldowns to come down.
Again, I'd like to remind you, this is Tom's number 2 game of the year.
Because the story that it tells and the characterization and stuff is so good. And the gameplay is functional. Returnal and Guardians of the Galaxy, the interesting thing with them being at the top of my list is that they're like super inversions of each other. In terms of Returnal's gameplay is phenomenal.
That's
and
true.
Its narrative falls flat a little bit for me. The narrative in Guardians of the Galaxy is phenomenal. And the gameplay
let me ask you this sincerely.
Average.
Gameplay in Uncharted and The Last of Us, which I think this is the closest analog to, is that gameplay better than this gameplay?
Yes.
Okay. Uncharted?
I don't even compare the two, because that Guardians it's an RPG with guns. Okay. It is about throwing abilities out. Your teammates are fighting. You're kind of managing that. Your shooting is just like the going up and whacking something with your sword. There's not really nuance or interest to it. It's just part of what you do in an RPG.
I do want to give credit to this super chat, Renault. Thank you so much. Between the movies being hits and now this game getting so much praise, do either of you have theories for why Guardians of the Galaxy keeps striking gold? And I think the answer to that, even though I just said that this, I think, is a stronger characterization than the James Gunn movies, is James Gunn. I think he made movies that were very approachable, and certainly Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is modern Star Wars in a very functional, very good way. It's a good movie. And then once you see what you can do with these characters, I think other people start to evolve what the notion is. So I think Guardians 1 leads to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy here. And I just think that this, which, to be fair, has 20 hours to talk to you about these characters rather than 2, does a better job of making them whole characters and characterizations than those movies actually do. So I think the reason you get these kinds of levels of success is that they have the pieces in place. James Gunn showed the world how those could work together. I want to give him credit there. But this, with 20 hours in a video game format, with what really amounts to a prestige television series. Like, there's episodes of this that really all tell their own story within a larger story, is why this works so well. It's that proof of concept that was the MCU. And then this is the realization of what those pieces and characters can be. Now, Tom, continue bagging on the combat.
I don't, maybe I'm being a little unfair. I do like trying to set up the combos. It has a, like, almost Devil May Cry, like you're trying to get as high a rating as you can, and you actually get rewarded with that, with the effective experience. But again, it's all very lightweight compared to like a real RPG. Like, each of your guys has 4 abilities, 2 of which you can unlock for each. So that means all of your experience goes to unlocking 8 things.
It's light.
Like, it is a story game. It is a Telltale game, kind of, almost, that has filled in the gaps with just a little bit.
Now, Telltale had a Guardians game. This is better than that.
Okay. I didn't play that. And that's certainly possible. Like I said, this tells a really interesting story with interesting characters that are fun to interact with. It seems like it's responding to me a lot, which is something I think is really cool, in terms of like, oh, this decision I made over here comes out, and like, maybe that has an effect. My guess is it's mostly illusory. If I go through on run 2 and I do completely different things, it's like, that played out pretty close to the way it played out. I don't know. But I mean, that might have been true for Dragon Age as well. And I love that game for the fact that it felt so responsive to the things that I did. That it felt like it was telling my story. Even if ultimately that was the same story everyone got. Mostly.
Yeah, no, it's tweaked around the edges, which is important. And you can do little things that, as you said, are reflected upon later, and make arcs out of the decisions that you made. I can tell you that happens. So it's a tremendous feat out of nothing. I mean, I wasn't excited about this at all. It was October. I hadn't bought anything in a little while. I said, yeah, okay, space. And and then I couldn't stop gushing about it, which is why you knew it was going to be my number one. And I was super surprised about that. I think I wound up tweeting on social media that is this going to be my game of the year? This seems weird. So Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, my number one. Tom's number two. I think we can get that up here now with your final list. And I think that should just about do it for us here. We got the lists here. And not number one for Tom. His Returnal. It's cool. Boxes everywhere.
It's all a fake.
Yeah, what can I say? But yeah, look at that list. Dungeon Encounter is Dungeons. Don't get confused for the
PC strategy game.
Yeah, Dungeons 1 from whenever. Far Cry 6, Griftlands, Loop Hero, Inscription, It Takes Two, Chorus, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Returnal versus Chorus, Dungeon Encounters, Wildermyth, Tales of Arise, Forza Horizon 5, Yuffie, Metroid Dread, The Forgotten City, Returnal, and the Guardians of the Galaxy. So, folks, clearly I'm right. Clearly, Tom's list
Don't do this to yourself.
Is deficient compared to mine. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, number one game of the year. What do y'all think? What does chat think about all of this? You know,
you've been quiet so far.
Versus this. No, they're busy debating the merits of James Gunn.
They are. No, right now they're talking about Firefly. A lot of Firefly.
Yeah, there you go. So that is our 2021 game of the year. I really do think that this year had a lot more fun stuff than people give it credit for. That this year you may have had to dig a little deeper in terms of looking at these kinds of things. But honestly, I had another 20 games that I wouldn't have been upset about being on my list that I had played this year. It was tremendous. You know, Psychonauts 2 didn't appear on either of our lists. That could easily be in a top 10. Tremendous game there. I really do like Flight Simulator. I just don't think of it as a game. So sorry about that. Who have those fights about those kinds of things. I got a recommendation here about a game called Undernauts, which I'm not familiar with. Ever heard of that, Tom?
Nope.
Okay, so we'll check that one out.
I kept confusing it with Undermine.
It's very M-rated though. Okay, thanks for the warning. I don't know what that means in a dungeon crawling JRPG. What kind of monsters are going to attack me in that context? But yes, thank you to everybody who dropped in to talk with us about all of this. Thank you to everyone that helped support the channel to allow us to have these conversations. Thank you most of all to Tom for making himself available for 3 hours on a Saturday.
Really thank my wife and family.
I will thank Tom's wife and family for allowing that. It is much appreciated. I love the tradition of doing this every December. I love seeing what Tom's got on his list versus mine. And I definitely have some stuff that I want to try out a little bit more. Loop Hero and Inscription, first and foremost, sound like things I really should have played by now. So I want to try those out because I haven't played them. And yeah, if you've got any questions on any of this, DM me, leave a comment to my videos, but you cannot go wrong with Returnal, Guardians, Ratchet and Clank, The Forgotten City, Metroid Dread, Yuffie. Well, you could probably go a little bit wrong with Yuffie if you haven't played the rest of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, get up to speed on the Final Fantasy VII experience, but I really love the Yuffie DLC. And yeah, let us know in the comments of this video, if you're watching in an archive later on, what you think of this list, what you think of my list. It's been a great deal of fun, and I will see you guys on the next episode of Virtual Legality. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.